Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Briana Nujin. Briana grew up in Hayden, Alabama, USA. Her friendly personality helped her make many friends. She doesn't care about boys at school. Instead, she devotes herself to her studies with the goal of becoming a nurse. After graduating high school, she enrolled in a nursing program at Wallace Community College. There, she met Stephen Nix, who was known to enjoy drinking and gambling. He was not concerned about having a stable job and often acted irresponsibly. Stephen worked as a cleaner at the medical center where Briana was interning, and he seemed uninterested in improving his life. Despite their differences, they began dating, and at one point, Briana moved into his house, where he lived with his parents. However, after a while, Stephen admitted to Briana that he was having an affair with a coworker. This revelation shocked Briana, leading her to end the relationship. She then focused on her studies and successfully earned her nursing degree. During the following year, Stephen repeatedly tried to reach out to her, pleading for another chance and promising he would never cheat again. Eventually, Briana relented and agreed to give him another opportunity. They later got married and both started working to save money for their first home. The problem started when Stephen lost his job as a cleaner. He attempted to find another job but had difficulty maintaining any position for long. After several attempts, he eventually stopped looking for work altogether. His daily routine began to mirror that of a teenager. He spent his nights playing computer games and slept until the evening. Although Briana had a good income, but Stephen, who was not contributing financially, took control of the family budget. Briana had to ask him for every dollar she needed for basic necessities, often pleading with him for even essential items and food. However, Stephen didn't control his spending, so he ended up in debt of about $50,000. To address this issue, he persuaded Briana to declare bankruptcy. At that point, he had such control over her that she felt she couldn't refuse. In 2019, they went through with this plan, and the debts were eliminated, but it took a big toll on Briana, leaving her morally exhausted. The stress caused by Stephen led her to depression, requiring expensive medications. After a few months, she was offered a life insurance policy at work, which depended on her income as a nurse. When she brought it up to Stephen, he agreed it was a good idea. By February 2020, Stephen was still unemployed and was heavily reliant on Briana. She started to suspect that he might betray her again and feared he was using illegal drugs. To protect herself, Briana hid her medications from him, but he continued to control her finances and her life. She felt trapped in a toxic relationship and was unsure how to escape, fearing her parents would judge her for wasting time on someone unworthy. Ultimately, she only confided in a few close friends and her sister, sharing her intention to file for divorce. On March 2, 2020, around noon, Stephen called 911, claiming he found his wife, Briana, unresponsive in the bathroom. The dispatchers instructed him to perform CPR, but throughout the call, he made no attempt to help his wife. Instead, he focused on telling his version of incident while ignoring their instructions. 5 minutes later, when paramedics arrived, a county sheriff's deputy and some of Stephen's family members were already present. It was unusual that an officer, who was supposed to be half an hour away from the incident, arrived even before the paramedics. The Stephen family lived far away, yet they arrived at his house very quickly. Soon after, Briana's relatives also arrived. Stephen called his mother and sister at 12:20 p.m. after the ambulance had arrived. He informed them that Briana had ended her life and said he had witnessed similar things in the past. His family was shocked and rushed to the house. The medics tried to revive Briana, but it was too late. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was already cold, indicating that she had been dead for several hours. A syringe with an 18mm needle was found nearby, leading to speculation that Briana may have died from an overdose of illegal drugs. Stephen explained that his wife's body had already cooled down when he found her. He said he was preparing to go outside when he heard a loud noise from the bathroom, which sounded like something had fallen. He dismissed it, thinking it was just mobile phone. After going shopping and returning about an hour later, he went upstairs and found his wife lifeless. Briana's family rejected the idea that her death was due to an overdose. They frequently communicated with her and did not see any signs of substance abuse. As a nurse, Briana was subject to random screenings for alcohol and illegal drugs at work, and her results were consistently negative. Her colleagues also expressed disbelief, stating they could not imagine her using anything harmful. When Briana's relatives arrived, they observed that Stephen appeared calm and not overly concerned about the situation. He was even cleaning the bathroom. However, his demeanor changed dramatically, and he became nervous once police officers arrived. While the police were focused on investigating the crime scene, Stephen took a bag of collected garbage from the bathroom and threw it into his pickup truck instead of the trash bin. When the police requested access to Briana's mobile phone, Stephen refused. However, her sister was able to unlock the phone and discovered that Stephen's last call to Briana was made at 7:53, a time when he usually would still be asleep after a night of playing video games. When questioned by the police, Stephen claimed he had called her number just to tease her, but he did not explain the nature of the joke. Additionally, at 12:02, after calling 911, Stephen inexplicably sent a text message to Briana. He could not explain why he would text someone who had already passed away. He also refused to allow the police to inspect his car. After learning that he had thrown the garbage bag away, the investigator had to return to the station to obtain a warrant. This inadvertently allowed Stephen time to get rid of the evidence. He quickly got rid of the garbage and erased any traces of his actions. The crime scene was thoroughly cleaned by the next day, when Briana's relatives arrived to gather items for the burial. Briana's sister was shocked to discover that Briana didn't even own nice underwear. This seemed odd. It also shows that her husband does not allow her to spend any money on herself. The following day, Stephen called Briana's sister, Brittany, and invited her to his home for a discussion. When she arrived, his relatives were already there. He showed her 2 empty bottles of opioid painkillers and a bag of syringes. Stephen claimed he found these items in a drawer of Briana's belongings, suggesting she died from a drug overdose due to a long-standing addiction. However, this medication can only be prescribed by prescription, and it certainly does not belong to Briana. Brittany was sure that Stephen was lying. After Briana's death, Brittany and her mother went through Briana's things and didn't find anything missing. They would have been aware if anything was gone. Then, Stephen showed Brittany another drawer that had Briana's underwear in it. He claimed to have found more evidence there that Brittany and her mother had overlooked. At that point, Brittany started to think that Stephen might have been involved in Briana's death, and she no longer wanted to listen to him. Brittany went to the funeral home to style her deceased younger sister's hair and makeup, Briana, despite strong objections from Stephen's family. Upon arriving, she quickly realized why they were so concerned. She discovered her sister's body covered in numerous fresh bruises and over 80 injection marks, some new and others starting to heal. At the time of her death, Briana was a certified nurse and knew how to administer injections properly. If she had a secret substance addiction, her level of bruising is also not normal. Additionally, some injection sites were located in where Briana couldn't have reached herself without assistance. They also found signs of trauma on her palms, resembling defensive wounds. The condition of the needle marks indicated they were inflicted about 8 to 12 hours before her death. The nature of some injuries suggested that someone had restrained Briana while administering the injections. This case cannot be considered end your own life, and it feels like the police are against Briana. Brittany was able to take several photos of the Briana body before being removed from the funeral home. She collected crucial evidence indicating that Briana had died a tragic death. Brittany suspected that Briana's husband, Stephen, was responsible. At Briana's funeral, Stephen did not speak to anyone or offer any greetings. He attempted to fake tears but ultimately had none, and many attendees noticed he appeared very unnatural. Several witnesses said Stephen bragged about connections that could help him evade justice, he even speaking with a mourner who turned out to be a police officer from another city, but he quickly ended the conversation when he realized this. At that time, no one was aware that the deputy sheriff who arrived at the scene before everyone else was related to Stephen. Briana's sister discovered that this deputy was not included in the investigation records, despite having full access to the crime scene. In October 2020, an investigator contacted Briana's family to inform them that she had been the victim of a crime. The investigator suggested that she may have been killed because she witnessed another crime and was killed as an unintended witness. However, this theory was never confirmed, and the investigation was eventually closed. Stephen continued to live in the home he shared with his late wife, Briana. Just a few days after Briana's death, Stephen's longtime mistress moved in with him. They even renamed Briana's favorite dogs. He received $160,000 in life insurance money from Briana's death. Stephen rarely left the house and continued to live a childish lifestyle, spending the insurance money on video games, pouring concrete in front of the house, buying expensive car parts, and acquiring weapons and gifts for his lover. Stephen showered lover with lavish gifts, including jewelry and ostrich leather boots. However, he was unable to afford a tombstone for Briana's until 6 months later, and this only happened after her relatives pressured him to do so. Briana's family was appalled by his actions from the start. They sought justice for her by filing complaints with the police and other authorities, but their efforts were in vain. The case was closed, labeled as an accident, and no investigation was conducted to gather evidence or identify suspects. Briana's family continued to appeal to higher authorities, requesting that the police reopen the investigation, but they were told it was under the jurisdiction of a different police station. The Briana's family is concerned that Stephen's connections are obstructing the investigation. Despite this, Briana's sister remained persistent, and the case was reopened. Unfortunately, it was soon discovered that all the evidence had been lost, and no thorough examinations had been conducted during prior investigations. Stephen is still withholding crucial case information from Briana's sister and mother. Although he claims that access to the medical report from the pathologist is restricted until an official conclusion is reached, this is misleading. He is aware of the report's contents, raising questions about his motives. Eventually, the Briana's family hired a private detective who was able to uncover various materials. One significant find was video footage from a search of Stephen's car and home, which showed him smiling brightly while leaning over Briana's lifeless body. Following the public revelation of this footage, Stephen became fearful and installed security cameras around the house. Meanwhile, Briana's sister Brittany continues to search for evidence that proves Stephen was involved in her younger sister's death. Brittany sent a photo of a package of fentanyl to Briana's co-workers, who firmly stated that the medicine package did not come from the hospital, as they had never seen such drugs before. It was later revealed that a different drug from another manufacturer was used at their workplace, which had different packaging. This contradicted Stephen's earlier claim that Briana had become addicted to drugs at work. Moreover, an official request from a medical institution confirmed that Briana could not have stolen the drugs, as their records were strictly monitored. The large needles found in Briana's home were not typically used for such drugs, and Briana, a nurse, was aware of this. Additionally, Briana's family received a toxicology report about 4 months after her death. The report revealed that her body contained high levels of various psychotropic substances. including of antidepressants and fentanyl, almost double the lethal dose. The Briana's family believes that Briana, given her experience with medications, would not have made such a mistake or acted carelessly. When Brittany spoke to the medical examiner responsible for the autopsy and the cause of death determination, he mentioned that the conclusions in the autopsy report heavily relied on the circumstances surrounding the death. They reviewed reports from investigative agencies like the sheriff's office and the coroner's office. Briana's death certificate states that the immediate cause of death was an overdose, and it categorizes her death as an accident. However, achieving justice remains difficult. The Briana's family initiated a petition to raise public awareness, which could have helped with legal and social expenses. Unfortunately, they only raised $5,000 instead of the needed $20,000, leaving the majority of the financial burden on Briana's family. The case is over. Justice has not been served. We will follow the new details of the case in the future. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Minhaz Zaman. Minhaz Zaman, a Canadian with a promising future. However, instead of attending York University to study mechanical engineering, he chose to deceive his parents and live a lie. As the expected graduation date drew near, maintaining this double life became increasingly difficult, severely impacting his mental state. This ultimately led to the tragic outcome of him murdering his entire family. In an attempt to gain attention, Minhaz posted photos of his crime on his Discord channel. Initially, many believed it was a joke, but it soon became clear that the photos were genuine. Discord's anonymous features allowed Minhaz to hide his true identity, making it challenging for users to uncover his real name, age, and location. In Bangladesh, a country plagued by poverty and overpopulation, many sought a better life abroad. Monarez, born in 1971, felt an insatiable desire to improve his circumstances. Despite the country's rapid development, Monarez yearned for more. He met and married Momtaz, born in India, and they shared a dream of building a better future together in Toronto, Canada. After 2 years of preparation, Monarez and Momtaz made the move to Toronto. They settled into their new life and eventually started a family. 6 years after their arrival, they welcomed a son, Minhaz, followed by a daughter, Mesa, 2 years later. Momtaz and her husband Monarez were loving and dedicated parents who worked tirelessly to ensure their family's well-being and happiness. Momtaz was particularly close to their children and was known for her kindness and generosity. She spent a lot of time caring for her family and was always willing to lend a helping hand. In her community, Momtaz was a respected and well-liked figure, both in her neighborhood and among fellow Bangladeshi immigrants. Monarez was a more reserved person, but he was also highly respected in the community. He was a devout Muslim who prioritized his family's well-being above all else. As a taxi driver, Monarez was very familiar with the city of Toronto, thanks to his many years of experience. His dedication to his job earned him numerous awards, including being named the Best Employee of the Month and one of the top taxi drivers in his company. Both Momtaz and Monarez had high aspirations for their children, Melissa and Minhaz. Having successfully navigated the challenges of moving to a big city themselves, they expected their children to achieve great things. They dreamed of their children securing high-paying, prestigious jobs that would bring them comfort and prosperity. After relocating from poor conditions, Monarez and Momtaz were determined to provide their children with every opportunity to succeed. They worked hard to achieve their aspirations, which led to gradual but steady success. The family's first major milestone was buying a modest house on Mowan Road in Scarborough. With careful financial planning, they then acquired 2 investment properties, one in Scarborough and another in nearby Danforth. Momtaz took charge of managing the properties, and over time, the family's wealth grew steadily. As the family's assets increased, Momtaz felt a greater sense of responsibility towards her 2 children and their 3 properties. To help with the workload, Momtaz's mother, Firoza Begum, moved from India to join the family. This allowed Momtaz to strike a better balance between her work and personal life. In 2006, the family upgraded to a larger 4-bedroom house in Markham. At the time, it was widely believed that a career in medicine or engineering was the key to success. Monraz and Momtaz wanted their children to pursue these fields, with Monraz aspiring to become a neurosurgeon and Monraz aiming to become an engineer. However, their children had different plans. Melissa, in particular, was a rebellious child who resisted her parents' views and often pushed them away, despite showing great potential. Melissa frequently ran away from home, drank excessively, and used illicit substances, leading to reckless behavior. This behavior prompted strict and sometimes questionable intervention from her parents. If she failed to return home on time, she would be forced to spend the night outside. However, her mother, Momtaz, would occasionally unlock the back door to allow her to enter. The conflicts between Melissa and her father often escalated, drawing the attention of the police. In contrast, Monraz had a distinctly different personality. He was often described as shy and introverted, but he shared a warm and loving relationship with his mother. Momtaz was extremely devoted to her son, often giving in to his wishes and catering to his needs. She would drive him wherever he needed to go, cook his meals, keep his room tidy, and greet him after school with a home-cooked meal. As the eldest son, Monraz faced pressure from his parents to succeed and meet their high expectations. To cope with this pressure, he found solace in the world of video games, particularly massively multiplayer online (MMO) games like Perfect World. In this virtual world, Monraz could express himself freely and connect with people worldwide, overcoming his shyness and self-doubt. The game became a refuge for him, and he spent most of his free time immersed in it. Monraz's life was quite routine. Apart from accompanying his father to the mosque, he spent most of his time in his room, playing online games with his friends. However, his life took a significant turn after he graduated from high school. He thrilled his parents with the news that he had been accepted into the mechanical engineering program at York University. Initially, this achievement brought immense joy to his parents, Monraz and Momtaz. However, it also intensified the pressure on Monraz, as he was now expected to excel and had no room for error. As a result, he became even more introverted and immersed himself in the online world. Monraz started playing an updated version of the Perfect World game, which involved a group of players and a set of rules. He used the social network Discord to stay in touch with his friends and fellow players. The game's atmosphere was generally friendly, and players often formed close bonds with one another. In fact, many of them remained in contact even outside of the game. Monraz felt more at ease expressing himself in the virtual world of the game than he did in real life, where the atmosphere was often tense. As a result, he found solace in the game, using it as an escape from the stresses of reality. In contrast, Melissa acted out her frustrations in the real world, frequently clashing with her parents over various issues. Her rebellious behavior eventually led to an arrest for shoplifting, although she was fortunate to have the charges dropped in exchange for community service. After leaving home to live with her boyfriend, the tension in the household did not dissipate. Instead, it seemed to intensify, putting even more pressure on Monraz to find ways to cope. As a result, he became even more deeply immersed in the game, using it as a means of escaping the increasingly unbearable reality at home. As Melissa broke free from her parents' expectations, they began to pin their hopes on her son, Monraz, as the family's savior. They boasted about his engineering career at York University, but this turned out to be a fabrication. In reality, Monraz attended Seneca Community College, a less prestigious institution. Monraz struggled academically, felt isolated, and abandoned his faith, which deeply disappointed his devout parents. He often expressed frustration about his parents' constant interference in his life, which affected his personal relationships. Minhas met a girl online, which infuriated his parents and further fueled his resentment. However, he found a sense of independence through the online game Perfect World, where he connected with friends in a community on Discord. Initially, Minhas performed well in school, but his grades began to slip as his gaming obsession spiraled out of control. Minhas' excessive gaming habits started to take a toll on his academic performance. He began skipping classes and struggled to keep up with his studies, resulting in him having to retake several subjects. Eventually, he lost interest in studying altogether and stopped attending classes, opting to focus solely on gaming instead. To avoid arousing his parents' suspicions, Minhas would leave home every day pretending to go to York University. He wasn't actually attending classes. Instead, he would spend his days playing games at a cafe on his laptop, working out at the gym, and then returning to gaming until late at night. In online conversations with his gaming friends, Minhas would occasionally joke about leaving the group and make cryptic comments about potentially going to prison. However, these statements were not taken seriously by his online friends, as they were familiar with his tendency to make humorous remarks. Additionally, Minhas often made jokes about sensitive topics such as homophobia and religion, but since it was a gaming community, no one took his comments seriously. Minhas' sense of humor took a darker and more aggressive turn over time. He started making jokes that were intentionally provocative, trying to elicit a reaction from others in the community. However, his attempts at humor were so off-putting that they led to multiple complaints. Ultimately, the community administrators banned him due to his behavior. Minhas became more and more isolated. In contrast, Melissa turned her life around, repaired her relationship with her parents, and even gained admission to York University. From the outside, the family appeared happy and successful, with new beginnings and a promising future. As Minhas realized he was about to lose his privileged status as the golden child, he committed a horrific crime on July 27, 2019, just one day before his expected graduation ceremony. On that day, the family was preoccupied with their daily routines. Minhas' mother and grandmother went about their usual schedule, attending a daybreak event, unaware of the impending tragedy. Minhas began to carry out his horrific plan by sneaking into his mother's bedroom. He struck her on the head with a crowbar, knocking her unconscious, and then slit her throat to ensure she was dead. He repeated this brutal act with his grandmother. After committing these heinous crimes, Minhas calmly returned to his room and opened Discord, where he sent a disturbing photo of his mother's mutilated body next to the crowbar. The recipients of the photo were initially unsure if it was a joke, as Minhas was known for his dark humor. However, the image was extremely realistic and did not appear to be a prank. Minhas was a well-known figure in the Perfect World gaming community, but his behavior had always been unsettling, earning him a negative reputation among many players. The situation took a disturbing turn when Minhas posted two photos that seemed to show a murder scene. The images were extremely realistic and did not seem to be a joke. Minhas then made a chilling post claiming that he had killed his mother and grandmother and was waiting for his sister and father to return home so he could do the same to them. As the situation worsened and became more intense, other gamers began to take Minhas seriously, fearing that his threats could lead to more deaths. Discord users were convinced that they were witnessing a series of crimes unfold in real time, but felt powerless to intervene. Desperate to prevent further harm, players tried to uncover Minhas' identity, but he had hidden his personal information, leaving no clues about his name, age, or whereabouts. In an effort to gather more information, users reached out to Minhas' friend, Junior, asking him to share any details he might know. When Junior confronted Minhas about the disturbing images, Minhas revealed that his threats were genuine and that he planned to kill his father and sister soon. Meanwhile, Melissa returned home to an eerily quiet house. Unbeknownst to her, Minhas was waiting inside. As she entered the house, he attacked her with a crowbar, striking her on the head, and then slit her throat. After committing the crime, Minhas took a photo of Melissa's body and sent it to his friend John via private message. Minhas posted a photo with a disturbing message, claiming that he had struggled with his sister Melissa for 10 minutes, during which she cried and screamed. In a private message to John, Minhas expressed extreme self-loathing, stating that his parents would be ashamed of him and that he was a coward and subhuman. Minhas then sent John several more photos, including one of the murder weapon and a selfie with a bloody knife. John was horrified and shared these photos with the rest of the group, confirming that Minhas had indeed committed a third murder. Group members quickly saved the photos as evidence against Minhas. Meanwhile, Minhas continued to act normally, waiting for his father to return home. When his father, Monaras, entered the garage, Minhas ambushed him, stabbing him in the neck, just like his other victims. Minhas took a photo of the victim, which the group was unable to prevent. In a shocking turn of events, Minhas shared a disturbing message with online friends, stating, "I consider myself a coward and a loser. As an atheist, I don't believe in an afterlife, so I feared death and wanted others to die instead, sparing them suffering. I realize now how pathetic and selfish I've been." What followed was even more alarming. Minhas told another online friend that he had murdered his entire family and was prepared to spend the rest of his life in prison. He then invited this friend to view photos of the crime scene. However, the story takes a crucial turn. One of the online friends discovered a way to obtain Minhas' IP address, which could reveal his location. With this information, the group was able to track Minhas to his home in Toronto. A user from Minnesota, who was part of the online conversation, contacted their local police department, which in turn alerted the Toronto police to Minhas' location. The police began their investigation after receiving information from an anonymous source. Meanwhile, Minhas was still active online, chatting with users who were inquiring about his next steps. He claimed he would try new things, including drinking, smoking, and reconnecting with an ex-girlfriend. However, it was only a matter of time before the police caught up with him. They were able to track his IP address, contacted his internet service provider, and obtained his physical address. Surprisingly, Minhas did not take steps to cover his digital tracks, despite being an avid gamer and computer user. Just 12 hours after the crime, officers arrived at the Minhas residence. As they looked up, they saw Minhas looking out of his bedroom window. At this point, the police had limited information and evidence, relying mostly on tips from online users. They were uncertain about the accuracy of the reports. But Minhas unexpectedly made the police's job easier. After posting a farewell message on Discord, announcing that the police had arrived, he voluntarily went downstairs, opened the door, and surrendered to the authorities. When questioned by the police, Minhas responded that this was his family's home and that they would discover the truth for themselves. The bodies of Monaras and Melissa were the first to be found, followed by Momotaz and Firoza, near the entrance to the house. Minhas was immediately arrested by the police on suspicion of murder. He was then taken to the local police station for further questioning. During the interrogation, Minhas displayed unusual calmness, showing no visible emotion. The lack of emotional response was notable, as if he was discussing an inconsequential event. He was ultimately charged with 4 counts of murder, 3 first-degree murders and 1 second-degree murder. In court, the evidence strongly indicated his guilt. The Perfect World gaming community had preserved a record of all his online messages, which served as evidence against him, confirming his culpability to a great extent. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Londano. Jennifer Londano, a 31-year-old engaged and responsible individual, failed to arrive at her job in Englewood, New Jersey, prompting concerns from her family and friends. As the manager of the newly opened Luna Lounge on Armory Street, Jennifer was a diligent worker with a spotless attendance record. However, on June 25, 2017, she vanished without a trace after closing the bar in the early morning hours. When she didn't show up for her shift that evening, her coworkers grew worried and attempted to contact her. But her phone was switched off, which was unusual because she always maintained regular communication with them. This lack of response heightening their anxiety, her loved ones decided to file a missing person report with the police, highlighting that she always checked in with them before going anywhere. As the investigation began, police visited Jennifer's apartment, where she lived alone. The officers found the front door locked with no signs of forced entry or damage. Upon entering the apartment, they initially noticed nothing out of the ordinary. The space was clean and well-maintained, with no signs of disarray or theft. At first glance, nothing suggested that the apartment was a crime scene. After investigating Jennifer's apartment and finding no leads, the police visited the bar where she worked as a manager to gather more information. They spoke with the staff at the establishment and discovered that Jennifer was well-liked by everyone, with no reported conflicts with patrons or employees. Her co-workers described her as kind, helpful, and highly respected. Jennifer was a driven and ambitious person who had a strong work ethic. In 2016, she partnered with 40-year-old Rafael Lolos to open the Luna Lounge in Englewood, New Jersey. The bar was successful, thanks in part to Jennifer's exceptional people skills and management abilities. Lolos provided the financial backing, while Jennifer was the face of the business, charming customers with her warm personality. What the police discovered during their conversation with the bar staff was that Jennifer and Rafael's relationship went beyond business. They were romantically involved, and their relationship was public knowledge. Despite their close relationship, they had not yet taken the step of living together. The investigation revealed that on the morning Jennifer was last seen, she had closed the bar and gotten into Rafael's car, which was waiting for her after work. As the last person to see her, Rafael became a key person of interest, and the detectives decided to bring him in for questioning. Rafael claimed that he drove Jennifer home from work after she closed the bar, and they spent some time together at her apartment before he left to let her rest for his shift that evening. Following her disappearance, Rafael maintained contact with Jennifer's family and collaborated with them to try to determine her whereabouts. Since there was no apparent connection between Rafael and Jennifer's disappearance, the police concentrated on investigating other leads. However, they faced challenges due to Jennifer's phone being turned off on the day she disappeared, with the last signal coming from a cell tower near her home. Neighborhood interviews yielded no suspicious information. As part of the investigation, the police requested banking records, as they often provide crucial clues in such cases. When the bank shared the data, it revealed an unexpected development: Jennifer's bank card had been used even after she went missing. The investigation led detectives to suspect that Jennifer was intentionally hiding, but her family strongly disagreed, convinced that she would never willingly cause them distress. To gather more information, the police began to investigate the activity on her card, seeking to determine when, where, and how it was used. 2 days after Jennifer's disappearance, on June 27th, a pedestrian walking along Pier 44 in Brooklyn noticed something unusual in the water. The person stared at the object for a while, unable to identify it, before realizing with shock that it was a human body, or at least part of one. The police were summoned to the scene, and the pier was sealed off. A thorough search by divers yielded no additional body parts or evidence. The police faced a daunting challenge in identifying the victim, but a potential lead emerged. A tattoo was discovered on the victim's right thigh during a forensic examination. The tattoo, which may have belonged to the victim, was partially translated from Sanskrit, an ancient Indian language with complex grammar. The police released an image of the tattoo, hoping someone would recognize it and provide information. Investigations revealed that the tattoo's inscription was Sanskrit, but incorrectly written. The tattoo artist and the victim seemed to intend to write Liliana, but did so with grammatical errors, suggesting neither of them was familiar with the language. For days after the initial gruesome discovery, police received another disturbing call from a passerby who spotted a leg on the riverbank near 79th Street. Police immediately cordoned off the area and pulled the leg out of the water. The leg, which was intact from the knee down, seemed to match the remains found earlier, leading investigators to believe they belonged to the same person. A notable detail was the pink-painted fingernails on the leg. Despite an extensive search by divers in the area, no other remains or evidence were found. However, forensic analysis soon confirmed that the fragments found were indeed from the same body. Around this time, the police had already identified the victim. A few days after releasing an image of the distinctive tattoo, a woman contacted the police station and revealed that she knew the tattoo's owner. It was Jennifer's mother, Gladys Quintero, who recognized the tattoo on the news and recognized it as belonging to her daughter. The tattoo, it turned out, was a tribute to Jennifer's late aunt and symbolized the name Lily or Liliana. Jennifer's mother to New York to identify human remains. When it was confirmed that the remains were Jennifer's, the family was left shattered. The discovery marked a significant turn in the case, transforming a missing person investigation into a homicide probe. The family was not only grief-stricken by Jennifer's death, but also horrified by the brutal circumstances surrounding it. Unfortunately, due to the state of the remains, it was impossible to determine the exact cause of death. Despite an extensive search, the police were unable to recover additional body parts. As family and friends paid their respects to Jennifer at her workplace, the bar, detectives were making progress in their investigation. They tracked down leads on Jennifer's credit card usage. Through a thorough review of security footage and store visits, detectives identified the person who had used Jennifer's credit card, Raphael, Jennifer's boyfriend. They discovered that Raphael had left Jennifer's apartment on the day she disappeared to go shopping. His purchases, made with Jennifer's credit card, included a box of garbage bags and 2 meat cleavers from different stores. Later that evening, he crossed the George Washington Bridge into Manhattan, and his cell phone records placed him near the Hudson River. Raphael went home after leaving Jennifer's apartment and never returned. 2 days later, Jennifer's torso was discovered. The police suspected that Raphael might have killed her and dismembered her body using meat cleavers, a disturbing thought considering their romantic relationship. However, the evidence pointing to Raphael's guilt was mounting. As a result, the police obtained an arrest warrant and a search warrant for his home, anticipating that they would soon apprehend him. Raphael attempted to evade capture by renting a hotel room and paying in cash, but he was quickly tracked down and arrested. He did not resist arrest and denied any involvement in Jennifer's death, claiming that Jennifer had given him her credit card. Raphael continued to insist that Jennifer was fine when he left her, but detectives uncovered more evidence that contradicted his testimony. A search of his home revealed dark red stains in the bathroom, which were later confirmed by a lab test to be Jennifer's dried blood. Detectives investigating Jennifer's disappearance analyzed her communications with Raphael and found a pattern of frequent arguments, typically sparked by jealousy. A search of Raphael's home uncovered a box sent via post office and a bag that had previously contained a GPS tracking device. It became clear that Raphael had secretly installed the device on Jennifer's car, allowing him to monitor her movements. Cell phone data revealed that Raphael had picked Jennifer up from work and taken her to her apartment. Although Jennifer's phone was soon turned off, Raphael's phone remained active. Between 9 p.m. and midnight on the day of her disappearance, his phone sent a signal to a cell tower near the Hudson River. This suggests that Jennifer may have already been dead by then, and Raphael may have driven to the river to dispose of her body. Raphael and Jennifer's relationship was complex and tumultuous, with conflicts often centered on financial issues. Despite their efforts to establish a business together, opening a bar less than a year before her disappearance, their relationship was marked by animosity and blurred boundaries. Raphael's messages to Jennifer were volatile, veering between insults, threats, apologies, and declarations of love, with one notable instance where he referred to her as a gold digger. Jennifer's family was shocked and disbelieving when the man who had claimed to love her and helped search for her became the prime suspect in her murder. Raphael refused to explain himself, denied any wrongdoing, and hired a lawyer. Although police couldn't find the exact knives they knew Raphael had bought, they were able to purchase identical ones from the same store. Forensic analysis later confirmed that these knives were used to harm Jennifer's body. Raphael was subsequently charged with several crimes, including murder, desecration of remains, stalking, hindering apprehension, and credit card fraud. The trial, which began in November 2019, lasted for 2 months. Prosecutors claimed that Jennifer was killed by Raphael in her apartment during a jealous argument. Raphael's lawyers argued that the state had no concrete evidence to prove their claim, pointing out that there were no signs of a struggle in the apartment and no marks in the bathtub where Jennifer was allegedly dismembered. The prosecution countered that the lack of evidence was, in itself, evidence of a cover-up. The absence of any signs of a crime suggested that Raphael had made a deliberate effort to conceal his tracks. The bathtub, in particular, was found to be remarkably clean, with no DNA or physical evidence linking Jennifer to the scene. The prosecutor pointed out that an ordinary person's bathtub would not be as clean as the one in question. During the trial, Jennifer's mother emotionally addressed the judge, stating that the defendant had destroyed her life and her family. She emphasized that Jennifer was her beloved daughter, and the defendant's actions had left her devastated. After reviewing the case, the judge determined that Raphael was consumed by an obsession with Jennifer. When given the opportunity to speak, Raphael refused, only communicating with his lawyer. In December 2019, the jury deliberated for 3 days before finding Raphael guilty on all charges. The verdict was officially announced in February 2020. As a result, 43-year-old Raphael received the maximum sentence, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 63 years. This means he will be 106 years old before he can be considered for parole. Unfortunately, the remainder of Jennifer's body was never found. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Zoe Hastings. Zoe Hastings was born on November 21, 1996, in Kansas, as the oldest of 5 children. She was a responsible sibling, often putting her parents' needs before her own. Her family was deeply rooted in their faith, spending a significant amount of time at church. When Zoe was in high school, her family moved to Dallas, where she attended a school that fostered her creativity and passion for the arts. She excelled in drawing and enjoyed participating in school plays. Outside of school, Zoe worked at an art studio and as a lifeguard during her summer breaks. After graduating, Zoe had the opportunity to attend top universities, but she decided to delay her education to focus on her church. In October 2015, at the age of 18, Zoe was preparing for a mission trip with her church. She planned to attend the Sunday service to discuss the trip's details. Zoe left her house around 4:40 p.m. in the family minivan, promising her parents she would return for dinner. However, she failed to come back, which was unusual for her. Zoe's parents tried to reach her after the service, but she didn't respond to their messages or calls. They then contacted her friends, thinking she might have visited someone, but no one had seen her. As the evening wore on, her parents grew increasingly worried and decided to call the church to see if Zoe had shown up there. However, they were surprised to learn that Zoe had never arrived at the church. This was highly unusual behavior for Zoe, as she had always kept her parents informed of her current whereabouts and had never disappeared without explanation. So they drove themselves to the police station to report Zoe missing, and the police began the search. The police spent all night retracing the route from Zoe's house to the church but found no sign of Zoe. Using an iPhone tracking app, police were able to locate her phone. They discovered Zoe's phone just a few hundred yards from the church, near a small creek across the street. Zoe's parents rushed to the creek. An officer approached them and informed them that a car accident had been reported a few hours earlier and that police had received a call from a witness walking a dog. That witness claimed that a man had approached him and said that a woman had been injured in a car accident near the creek. The witness rushed to the scene and found a woman lying in a pool of blood, so he called 911. As the police investigated, they quickly identified the victim as Zoe Hastings. However, it soon became clear that she had not died as a result of the accident. The evidence suggested that she had been murdered. Zoe's body was found a short distance from the minivan, which was partially submerged in the creek. There was a significant amount of blood near her body, and police observed multiple cuts on her neck. Her dress was pulled up, and her underwear was rolled down, leading detectives to suspect that the killer had likely assaulted and abused her. The police prevented Zoe's parents from approaching her body, shielding them from the gruesome scene. As they investigated further, they discovered several clues. Notably, all the minivan doors except the driver's side were locked, suggesting that the perpetrator may have driven the vehicle themselves or approached Zoe directly at the scene. Beneath the bridge, about 10 feet from the creek, a blood-stained knife was discovered. It's likely that this was the weapon used in Zoe's murder. By examining her phone records and GPS data, investigators established that Zoe had arrived at the creek by 5:01 p.m. after leaving home at 4:41 p.m. GPS revealed she drove there in approximately 20 minutes, indicating her death probably occurred within a few minutes of arrival. To account for this timeline, investigators reconstructed her activities that afternoon, tracing her stops from leaving her home. During the examination, investigators uncovered evidence. Zoe visited the nearby DVD rental store after departing home. To return a DVD she borrowed from that rental shop situated beside a Walgreens, near her place of residence. More than 50 people near that area had confirmed it. Among them had been Lester Clark, a tattoo shop employee who had worked next door to the DVD store. It wasn't until a few hours after work around 4:45 p.m. that Lester revealed he had seen a female customer who had been shopping at the store and had approached her. Lester admitted to having witnessed Zoe going to the DVD rental store. Lester added that he saw a man behaving suspiciously near the crime scene. Lester described the man as short and heavily built, and African American. However, Lester was too far away to notice any other distinguishing features. Later that evening, Lester saw the same man walking towards the store alone. The second witness, Gary Whitman, a homeless man, corroborated Lester's account. At around 4:45 p.m., Gary saw a woman approaching a white minivan in the parking lot. A man then approached her from behind, preventing her from entering the vehicle. The man showed her something from his pocket, and the woman subsequently got into the car, moving to the passenger seat. The man then drove away. Gary also described the suspect as short and heavily built, and African American, and found the situation highly suspicious. He went into the store and asked the clerk to call 911, but it is unclear if the clerk made the call. During the investigation, experts made several key discoveries. A forensic pathologist examined Zoe's body and found a small amount of male semen, indicating that Zoe had been sexually assaulted before being murdered. However, the amount of semen was too small to conduct a full DNA analysis. Investigators analyzed Zoe's car for any foreign fingerprints on the doors or steering wheel, but found none. This discovery, combined with witness statements, suggested that the killer may have driven Zoe away in her minivan. However, the lack of fingerprints did not mean that the killer did not drive the car, as they may have wiped down the surfaces after the crime. When examining Zoe's body, investigators found several hairs, but they were too small to extract a full DNA sample from. However, a breakthrough came when a DNA sample was found on a knife near the crime scene. The DNA was matched to 34-year-old Antonio Cochran, who had a violent criminal history, including arrests for theft, assault, and home invasion. 1 year before the murder, Antonio was accused of sexually assaulting a 17-year-old girl, the daughter of his girlfriend. According to the girl, Antonio offered her a ride, but took her to a secluded area and assaulted her. He was arrested and claimed that the sex was consensual, but the prosecution was unable to prove his guilt, and he was acquitted. Antonio became the prime suspect in the murder investigation. As a result, he was arrested. However, during the interrogation, Antonio denied any involvement in the crime. To gather more evidence, investigators collected a DNA sample from Antonio and compared it to the semen found on the victim's body. Unfortunately, both DNA samples were too small for a full analysis, so the experts used a different method. The partial DNA profiles from the hair and semen were then compared to Antonio's DNA. The results showed that it was matched, but not definitively. Meanwhile, detectives searched Antonio's smartphone and found some incriminating text messages. On the day before the murder, Antonio sent a message to a friend he lived with, stating he was moving out and would never see him again. At 1:48 a.m. the next day, Antonio sent another message to his ex-girlfriend, telling her that his stepmother had died right in front of him. But this information was later found to be false. In the hour leading up to Zoe's death, Antonio sent 2 texts to another woman, revealing that he had been drinking, driving around the city, and crying. These messages were his last before the incident. Later that evening, at 9:30 p.m., Antonio texted a friend, expressing confusion and despair about his life. The next day, he sent a message to his ex-girlfriend, stating that his life was over and that she would soon understand why. Detectives investigating Antonio's online activities found that he had visited local news websites over 30 times before his arrest, with a particular focus on the crime sections. Notably, 5 of these access were directly related to articles about Zoe's murder. This was unusual, as prior to the death of Zoe, Antonio rarely visited news sites. His browser history also showed a single visit to a page about gang activity. Further investigation of Antonio's smartphone revealed GPS data that, at 4:34 p.m., Antonio's phone connected to a cell tower covering the area where the store was located, coinciding with the time Zoe was there. Although this data was not conclusive evidence, it suggested that Antonio's phone was in the vicinity of the store just minutes before Zoe left the parking lot. This was significant, as Antonio's home was far away, and his phone had been connected to a different nearby tower throughout the day. Detectives discovered that Antonio had started working at a grocery store just 3 days before the incident. However, on the day after the murder, he skipped his shift without providing any explanation. Despite the extensive circumstantial evidence against Antonio, the strongest evidence remained his DNA on the knife handle. Nevertheless, this evidence alone might not be enough for a conviction, as merely holding a knife does not prove involvement in the murder. It is possible that Antonio used the knife in a different context, and someone else could have used it to commit the crime. Since no other evidence was found, detectives decided to proceed with the case and take it to court. The prosecution presented its report of the events. According to the prosecution, Antonio approached Zoe in the parking lot, threatening her with a knife and forcing her to get into her car. He then took the driver's seat and drove away. The prosecution argued that Antonio, who was emotionally distressed due to the death of a relative and intoxicated from consuming a significant amount of alcohol. The investigators' theory was that Antonio had intended to assault Zoe when he abducted her. He chose his victim, Zoe, by chance when he spotted her in the parking lot. Antonio saw an opportunity to commit a crime and acted on it. He then drove to a secluded creek area that was difficult to spot due to the surrounding trees and low-lying terrain. At this location, he forced Zoe out of the car and attacked her, stabbing her 6 times in the neck area. Antonio got back into the car and tried to drive it into the creek, possibly to hide any remaining evidence. However, the car only partially submerged, allowing Antonio to potentially wipe his fingerprints from the steering wheel and door handle before fleeing the scene and return to the store, where Lester had seen him according to initial testimony. The defense argued that most of the evidence was not convincing enough and did not prove Antonio's guilt. For example, hair analysis only showed that the DNA could not be ruled out as belonging to Antonio. But it did not confirm his involvement. DNA on the knife also did not necessarily prove that Antonio committed murder. The defense argued that Antonio could have touched the knife under different circumstances before working at the store. They suggested he might have used the knife while working at a movie theater, where he sometimes collected items left behind by visitors. However, there was no evidence to support this claim. Furthermore, if someone had taken the knife from the theater and used it to commit the murder, they would have had to be careful to avoid removing Antonio's DNA from the handle, which would have been a difficult task. The defense attempted to downplay the testimony of the second witness, Gary, by revealing that Gary had a warrant for his arrest due to a parole violation. They tried to exclude Gary's testimony, but the prosecution argued that Gary's willingness to cooperate with police, despite the risk of arrest, proved his sincerity. Gary insisted he wanted to do the right thing, even if it meant getting arrested. Antonio's lawyers argued that their client was elsewhere at the time of Zoe's murder in order to helping a friend, but they failed to provide any substantial evidence to support this claim. Initially, the prosecution sought the death penalty for Antonio, but as the trial progressed, they realized this would be difficult to achieve with the available evidence. They dropped the request for the death penalty. After a lengthy deliberation, the jury found Antonio guilty of murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Zoe's parents expressed gratitude to the investigators and all those involved in the trial for delivering justice for their daughter. Her father shared that he had always warned his children about the dangers of the world and had taken every precaution to protect them. However, despite his efforts, his eldest daughter was abducted just a short distance from their home, and he was powerless to prevent it. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, Mexico. She was the second of 3 children to parents Maria del Sacramento Saganon and Manuel Perez. Raised alongside her older brother Javier and younger sister Ana, the family lived modestly, but provided their children with a good education and motivated them to aspire to a better life. Abril excelled in school, showed a talent for mathematics and entrepreneurial skills, and dreamed of obtaining a high-quality higher education to secure a well-paying job with career advancement opportunities. After finishing high school, Abril was admitted to the most prestigious university in Nuevo León, where she earned a master's degree in finance and business administration. Upon graduating, she was hired in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. A few years later, she ventured into digital sales and quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was young, beautiful, successful, ambitious, and steadily advancing towards the life she had always dreamed of. She built a brilliant career, supported her family, and was full of plans for the future. However, her personal life remained unsettled, which disappointed her loved ones. Nevertheless, she was confident she would find true love and live a long, happy life. Little did Abril know how her marriage to the perfect man would turn out. Abril met Juan Carlos in the mid-1990s when her career was taking off. They were both ambitious, which created a strong connection between them. He was captivated by her beauty, charm, kindness, and intelligence, while she was drawn to his sharp intellect and determination. As their companies collaborated on projects, they crossed paths several times, eventually leading Juan Carlos to realize he was in love with Abril. Through mutual acquaintances, he obtained her phone number and asked her out on a date. The feelings were mutual, and their relationship developed quickly. By 1998, they decided to formalize their relationship with a wedding. By then, they had both achieved considerable career success and were involved in developing online stores, which showed great promise. Their life resembled a true fairy tale, evoking envy and admiration among their peers. After 3 years of marriage, Abril gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. 2 years later, they had a son named Juan Carlos Jr., and another 2 years after that, they welcomed a third child, a boy named Julio Andreas. Despite having 3 young children, Abril managed to balance her parental responsibilities with her career advancement, barely taking any maternity leave. From the outside, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, and happy. However, appearances were deceiving. Behind closed doors, Juan Carlos showed his true nature, being hot-tempered, aggressive, and harsh. He was intolerant of compromise, insisting that everything had to be exactly as he wanted. Over time, his behavior worsened, and verbal altercations escalated into physical confrontations. After the birth of their first daughter, Juan Carlos briefly softened, trying to control his emotions, but it didn't last long. By the time the third child was born, he no longer even tried to be a good father or husband. He would vent his anger on Abril, insulting and belittling her, and her tears seemed to lift his spirits. He regularly physically harmed her, often in ways that left no visible marks on her body, so she could hide the bruises under clothing or mask them with makeup. All this was done to protect his flawless reputation and pride himself on being a model family man, loving husband and father. Abril kept silent for years, trying not to tell even her sister and mother about the ongoing nightmare. She earned well and could have raised the children on her own, but her husband was a wealthy and influential man who could easily take the children away from her through the courts. By 2010, the ideal family facade had begun to crumble, and those who once admired them started to suspect that something was terribly wrong behind closed doors. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed, visibly thin, sleeping poorly, and frequently sporting bruises on her face and body that became increasingly difficult to conceal. In public, Juan Carlos maintained a calm and confident demeanor, pretending that nothing was amiss, playing the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with his wife politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a monster, making it increasingly dangerous for Abril to be near him. Despite pleas from loved ones to divorce him, Abril stubbornly insisted that everything was fine and that she would handle the problems with her husband herself. In 2014, Juan Carlos's career reached its peak when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in the field. After this promotion, the family moved to Mexico City, settling in a large house in one of the capital's best neighborhoods. Their children attended an elite private school, and Abril sincerely hoped that the move would positively affect their relationship. Contrary to expectations, the change only made Juan Carlos continue to physically harm and insult his wife, even doing so in front of their children. He began to groundlessly accuse her of infidelity, and whenever she tried to defend herself, he resorted to using his fists. He monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and later even hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. Over the next 4 years, Abril tried everything to save her marriage. despite her husband's behavior becoming utterly unbearable. She lived in a never-ending nightmare that outwardly seemed like a happy and successful union, with many even envying her for having a prominent, influential, wealthy, and seemingly caring husband. In 2018, the Sanchez family traveled to Monterrey to celebrate Catholic Christmas with the Perez family. However, Juan Carlos behaved towards his wife as he was accustomed, not shying away from her parents, who were horrified by what they witnessed. At that moment, Abril realized things could not continue this way and informed her husband that she would file for divorce once they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos flew into a rage, grabbing her throat and squeezing so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Only her mother, Maria del Soro, entering the room and raising the alarm prevented a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce, moving from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not save her from her tyrannical husband. On the morning of January 4th, while she was still asleep, Juan Carlos entered the bedroom holding a baseball bat, striking her hard on the head and attempting to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but managed to slip off the bed just in time, literally saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body while the eldest son took the bat from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed Abril with a serious concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow, requiring stitches. As soon as his wife and sons left the home, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to explain the situation and asked for help in resolving it. He also posted on his social media page, claiming that his wife had betrayed him, was unfaithful, and intended to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to take all their jointly acquired assets. Moreover, he claimed that his wife had stolen all the money from their home safe, and that when he tried to stop her, she injured him with a knife in the shoulder. As proof of his innocence, Sanchez shared photos of a bloody knife and stains on the floor, but these were later revealed to be fake. The blood was from Abril's own room, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite this, his friends believed him and shared his story on social media, sparking widespread outrage. Meanwhile, Abril had filed a police report against Sanchez, accusing him of attempting to kill her. After being released from the hospital, she moved out of their home with their sons and was granted temporary custody. Their adult daughter, who was in college, also sided with her mother and condemned her father's behavior. Sanchez was ordered to pay a small amount of alimony to Abril and their sons, but he disagreed with the amount. He faced a potential prison sentence, but as an influential businessman, he was confident he would avoid punishment. Abril returned to her parents' home in Monterrey, where she filed for divorce and began offering online consultations to women in similar situations. She planned to open a center for psychological and legal assistance for victims of domestic violence. 8.5 months after the incident, Sanchez was finally arrested and charged with femicide, bodily harm, and attempted murder. He was jailed for over a month, but managed to appeal the pretrial detention decision and was released. During the trial, crucial evidence, including hospital photographs and medical records, was not presented. The judge deemed the testimonies of Abril and her sons insufficient and released Sanchez, stating that his actions did not pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and frightened by the verdict, realizing that her ex-husband had used his connections to secure his release. She sent an official letter to the judge expressing fear for her life, but it had no impact. Immediately after being released, Sanchez began legal proceedings against Abril for custody of their sons, forcing her to return to Mexico City for court sessions. Abril arrived in Mexico City with her children on November 25th, fearing for their safety after a court session. As they drove to the airport, a motorcyclist stopped at a traffic light, pulled out a handgun, and fired twice at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. One bullet grazed their younger son, but none of the children were seriously hurt. Abril was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life for over 6 hours. But unfortunately, she died that evening due to severe injuries and significant blood loss. Abril's family, convinced that her ex-husband Juan Carlos was behind the brutal act, urged authorities to arrest him. However, law enforcement stated that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to discuss motives and couldn't claim that it was a hitman sent by Sanchez. The case was not classified as femicide until further investigation, and Juan Carlos remained free. After Abril's death, her children were placed in the care of their maternal relatives, while their father, Juan Carlos Sanchez, prepared to fight for custody in court. Sanchez's soon-to-be ex-wife's sister wrote an angry social media post blaming him for the incident, but her page was quickly blocked and later deleted. Despite this, the family decided to draw public attention to the case. The attack on Abril, which occurred on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence, sparked widespread outrage. People began sharing numerous cases where men had attempted to kill women but were not punished. As a result, the General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into Sanchez and instructed investigators to review the judge's decisions to release him. The judges involved in Sanchez's case were temporarily suspended and later removed from their positions. Mexican politician and women's rights defender Claudia Sheinbaum Parro confirmed that Abril's case had been reclassified as femicide and would be reinvestigated. The judges who had released Sanchez could face consequences for Abril's death if his guilt was proven. Sanchez posted on social media, calling for the perpetrator of his ex-wife's death to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. However, his daughter Ana Cecilia left an angry comment, accusing her father of cruelty and sharing photos of her mother taken in the hospital after Sanchez had attacked her with a bat. Despite the media attention, Sanchez was initially left free under a restraining order, required to check in weekly at a police station. However, after he failed to appear, a warrant for his arrest was issued. He used his resources and connections to flee the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Sanchez as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was declared wanted worldwide. An investigation was launched to find the hitman who killed Abril. Street camera footage revealed 2 cars following her vehicle as she left the courthouse with her children and lawyer. The motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone, but received instructions from individuals in the cars. It took investigators several months to identify some of the participants, and 2 suspects were finally arrested on March 5, 2020. Surprisingly, they did not resist arrest and began cooperating with authorities, hoping to reduce their sentences. It was confirmed that Sanchez was the mastermind behind the crime, having paid a substantial sum to 7 individuals involved in the act. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the chase cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. Juan Carlos, while in prison, had hired 2 experienced criminals to be his personal bodyguards. After they were released, he rehired them to find people to kill Abril, promising each a large sum of money if they succeeded. Once he had assembled a team, Juan Carlos paid them the promised money and gave them detailed instructions about Abril's route and vehicle. The toughest part was luring Abril to Mexico City, which he achieved by threatening to take her children if she didn't appear in court. Abril showed up in court as planned, but intended to return to Monterrey the same day. Juan Carlos knew this through his connections, but it wasn't until the end of October 2020 that 3 more people involved in the conspiracy were arrested on suspicion of drug distribution. It was later discovered that they were involved in Abril's murder. All the arrested individuals were part of Juan Maldonado's gang, known as Juan Balto, which had protected Sanchez while he was in prison. Maldonado agreed to help kill Abril in exchange for a large reward. He was arrested in November 2020 and began cooperating, confirming that Juan Carlos had hired people to kill Abril. With this new evidence, it was clear that Sanchez was both the client and organizer of the crime. His previous assault on Abril with a bat was reclassified as an attempted murder, leading the court to issue an arrest warrant for him on charges of femicide. By spring 2021, all the participants in the crime had been caught, except for Sanchez, who remained at large. The weapon used in the murder was also found. In total, 9 people from the same criminal group were detained, 7 of whom were directly involved in chasing and shooting Abril. 5 years after Abril's death, Sanchez, the mastermind of the crime, is still on the run, and his whereabouts remain unknown. The person who pulled the trigger was sentenced to 52 years in prison, while 2 others involved in the crime received 50-year sentences each. The other participants are still under investigation, and their fate has yet to be decided. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Diane Holick. Diane Holick, a 43-year-old senior executive at IBM, was known for her reliability. So when she missed a scheduled work call on the morning of November 16, 2001, her colleagues were immediately concerned. Unable to reach her, they alerted the police, asking them to check on her at home. The officers' discovery at her house was gruesome. Born in 1958 in New York City, Diane was a driven person who had built a successful career at IBM, one of the world's largest hardware and software companies. Over 20 years, her hard work had earned her a senior position, allowing her to work from her home office in Austin, Texas, where she had moved in 1996. Diane lived a luxurious life in the suburbs, hosting wine-tasting parties, frequenting expensive restaurants and dance clubs, and engaging in charity work. She was also trying to improve her personal life. In mid-November 2001, a severe storm warning was in effect in Texas, bringing torrential rains and tornadoes to Austin. On the morning of November 16th, Diane worked from home, but her company had scheduled a work call. Despite having multiple phones, including her home phone, she stopped answering all of them. Her colleagues left messages asking her to call back, and they soon became concerned when she didn't respond. They contacted the police department and requested that someone be sent to Diane's house to check on her welfare. When the officers arrived, Diane's neighbor, who had a spare key, noticed their presence. The police entered the house, where they were met with complete silence, broken only by the sound of dogs emerging from the kitchen. As they received no response from Diane, they began to search the house. In the second-floor bedroom, they made the grim discovery of Diane Holick's lifeless body. Diane's home was one of the cleanest crime scenes detectives had ever encountered. Her body, fully dressed, lay in the bedroom next to her bed. Strangulation marks on her neck, resembling those left by a rope, and signs of wrist binding with cable ties, indicated a crime had taken place. The lack of theft, struggle, or forced entry led detectives to suspect that Diane's killer was someone she knew and trusted. There was no evidence of forced intimacy before her death, but dark spots and red stains on the carpet near the bedroom entrance suggested a possible struggle. One anomaly in the otherwise tidy home caught the detectives' attention. A towel lying on the back of the living room sofa seemed out of place. They sent it to the laboratory for analysis, hoping it might provide a crucial clue. The police spoke to the people who knew Diane and found that she didn't have any known enemies, although it's possible that some might have been unknown. During their investigation, they discovered that Diane was in a romantic relationship with Dennis Conley, the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. This wasn't her first marriage. Her previous one had ended quickly. Diane and Dennis met through a dating service, and he had 2 children from a previous marriage. Dennis was a businessman living in Houston, around 150 miles from Austin, where Diane resided. Despite the distance and infrequent meetings, they grew close quickly, and after 2 months of communicating, Dennis proposed to Diane, giving her a $17,500 platinum ring. she accepted his proposal. According to Diane's close friends, her relationship with Dennis had begun to deteriorate recently. As an independent woman focused on building her career, Diane felt uneasy with Dennis's occasional attempts to control her. Another issue was the decision to move to Houston. The couple had decided to start their life together in his hometown, so Diane put her suburban Austin home up for sale. However, realtors struggled to find a buyer willing to pay the $435,000 asking price for the property. Detectives investigated whether Dennis was involved in Diane's death, asking him to come to the police station for a voluntary conversation without an attorney. Dennis agreed and spoke candidly with the detectives. The medical examiner's report indicated that Diane died between 3 p.m. on November 15th and 3 a.m. on November 16th. A strange detail caught their attention. Diane's wedding ring, given to her by Dennis, was missing from her finger, while her other jewelry in the bedroom remained untouched. This led to the theory that the killer had a personal motive or deliberately removed the ring to mislead the investigation. Dennis presented himself as a grieving person. The detectives asked him about his relationship with Diane and his whereabouts on the day of her death and the day her body was found. According to Dennis, he was in Houston at the time, claiming he last spoke with Diane on the morning of November 15th. He spent the entire day at work without contacting her again the following morning. When he couldn't reach her, he left a voicemail, unaware of her death. Dennis acknowledged that their relationship was troubled, revealing recent arguments before concluding the conversation. The police collected his fingerprints and a DNA sample, but it was possible he could have traveled to Austin, interacted with Diane, and returned to Houston by the next morning. However, after verifying his alibi, the detectives determined he had not left the city, so they had to pursue another suspect. Before leaving the police station, Dennis provided a crucial lead that changed the direction of the investigation, pointing out that Rye, one of Diane's co-workers, had shown an unusual interest in her. The detectives looked into this and found that Rye frequently visited Diane's home and sometimes walked her dogs, but he had a solid alibi, ruling him out as a suspect. When speaking with Diane's colleagues, the authorities discovered that a mysterious individual had inspected her house a few days before her death. He claimed he would make a cash offer if he liked the property, and planned to return with his wife in a few days to make a joint decision on the purchase. As this was one of the few leads the police had, they concentrated all their efforts on finding this unknown buyer, hoping someone might have seen him when he visited Diane's house. The detectives decided to investigate the owners of properties for sale in the area where Diane lived, suspecting that the mysterious buyer might have viewed more than just the victim's house. They conducted interviews with the owners and discovered that 7 women had experienced a similar incident. A 35 to 45-year-old man with a prominent nose and dark hair styled back had visited their homes on the day of Diane's death, without a real estate agent present. While 6 women had refused him entry, 1 woman had allowed him inside. According to her, the man's behavior became strange after entering the house. He didn't show any interest in the rooms or doors, and only asked her to show him the second-floor bedroom. She sensed something was off and asked him to leave. Notably, he had introduced himself as Walter Miller when requesting permission to view the property. The police searched their databases for the name Walter Miller in Austin, but found 2 individuals with that name, neither of whom matched the age or physical description of the suspect. As detectives probed the motive behind the crime, they wondered why the thief had only taken the wedding ring, and whether they might have stolen other jewelry or cash, given the victim's wealth and history of living alone, which made it impossible to determine the extent of her jewelry collection. They also questioned the significance of the perpetrator removing the cable ties that bound Diane's hands and taking them with him. Did he know her personally? The autopsy revealed no signs of sexual assault prior to Diane's death, and her body was found fully clothed. Despite this, the detectives returned to her home to search for any traces of semen, assuming the perpetrator might have left behind some evidence. However, their search yielded nothing. A composite sketch of a potential suspect was broadcast on evening news programs, urging anyone with information about a similar individual to come forward. One of the few leads available to investigators was a few strands of hair found on a towel at Diane's residence. Although the hair lacked roots, preventing a complete DNA analysis, detectives remained hopeful that a partial DNA profile could still yield results. A woman contacted the police after seeing the composite sketch, which she believed resembled a suspect in the Diane Hollick case. During her interview with detectives, she recounted how she and her husband had listed their house for sale 6 months prior. A man had arrived, claiming he wanted to purchase the property with cash, but needed to view it first. Since no real estate agent was present, she refused to let the stranger inside. 2 months later, the same man reappeared on her doorstep, introducing himself as Jim Taylor. With her husband away at work and only her young daughter present, the man again asked to enter the house. When she denied his request, he became agitated, shouting and insisting that he be allowed inside. The woman threatened to call the police, prompting the would-be buyer to leave. Still shaken, she wrote down the man's name and the license plate number of his minivan, which had been parked in her driveway. When she saw the suspect's portrait on the news, she immediately recognized him as the same person who had come to her house a while back. This new information led the police to obtain the license plate number, which they then used to identify the vehicle's owner through their database. However, the owner's name was not Jim Taylor, as they had initially suspected, but rather Patrick Anthony Russo. At first, it seemed unlikely that Russo was involved in Diane's death. He appeared to be a family man, living 40 minutes from Austin with his wife and 2 children, and even played in a local church music band. But as the police dug deeper into his past, they discovered a more sinister history. Russo was an ex-convict who had served time for a series of attacks on women. One of these attacks had even escalated to abduction, where he had tied his victim up with cable ties and attempted to strangle her, stopping only at the last moment. For this crime, he had been sentenced to 20 years in prison. While serving his sentence, Anthony Russo met his future wife Janet, a volunteer at the prison's church program. Despite his lengthy criminal record, Russo was granted parole after serving 8 years of his 20-year sentence. The police was skeptical about the coincidence, so they obtained a search warrant for Anthony Russo's residence. When the police arrived, Anthony answered the door, but they found no incriminating evidence inside his house, including Diane's ring or any other personal belongings. A subsequent search of his minivan also yielded nothing. However, the neighbors reported seeing a similar vehicle parked outside Diane's house on the day of her murder. Significantly, the police discovered several cable ties in the utility room that matched the ones that left marks on Diane's wrists. Although we might consider the tie as evidence, it's still indirect because anyone can purchase it at a hardware store. The investigator informed Anthony that his name had come up during an investigation and asked him to come to the station for a more in-depth conversation. At the station, the investigators asked Russo about his whereabouts on November 15th and 16th. Russo explained that on Thursday, the 15th, he traveled to Austin to visit a religious radio station but was unable to enter because no one answered the door. Coincidentally, this radio station is located near Diane Hall's house. According to Russo, he headed home around 4 p.m. but got slightly lost due to a hurricane, which delayed his arrival until around 6 p.m. When the police questioned Russo about his intentions to purchase a house, he claimed he had never browsed any properties for sale. This response proved to be pivotal, as it would later have significant repercussions. Upon being shown a photograph of Diane, Russo remained expressionless and denied ever having met her. Although the police were unable to find any evidence linking Russo to the crime, they were forced to release him. However, the following day, detectives visited the radio station Russo had mentioned and uncovered evidence that his previous statement about the closed doors was a fabrication. The employees at the station revealed that they had not closed the doors, as a large crowd had gathered in the lobby due to an approaching tornado. Meanwhile, a second woman approached the police after encountering a man who resembled the suspect's sketch while trying to sell her house. When the stranger came to her door with a pamphlet featuring local house listings, including her own, she let him in to view the property under the pretense that he would make a cash offer. However, when she showed him a bedroom, he attempted to attack her, but retreated hastily upon hearing her child cry in the adjacent room. The quick-thinking woman retained the pamphlet, which held a crucial fingerprint that the police later matched to Anthony Russo. Russo's claim of never having looked at houses for sale was thus discredited, and his false statement constituted a misdemeanor, a probation violation. Russo's arrest was prompted by his failure to meet parole conditions. Fearing he might flee while they gathered evidence linking him to Diane's death, authorities deemed it necessary to detain him. The police tracked down 15 women who had shown Russo around their homes. All of these women were later brought in to identify the suspect. In a lineup, the women saw 5 men, including Anthony Russo, all dressed similarly and with similar appearances. Each of these men repeated the phrase, "You have a beautiful house," in turn. 10 of the 15 women identified Anthony Russo as the man who had viewed their homes prior to purchasing. The other 5 women were unable to make a positive identification. When the police questioned Russo again, he knew he had been caught lying. Despite this, he continued to proclaim his innocence. At one point, he requested to see his wife and then refused to answer any more questions. The detectives soon received a report from the laboratory, which confirmed that the mitochondrial sequence of the hair found on the towel at Diane's house matched Anthony Russo's DNA. While this was a significant finding, it was not conclusive, as there was a small chance, 1 in 12,900,000, according to court documents, that the hair could have belonged to someone else. Although the investigation had accumulated a significant amount of circumstantial evidence, there was no single piece of direct evidence linking Russo to Diane Hollick's death. One additional piece of circumstantial evidence, however, was the report on the location of his cell phone, which placed Russo in the same area where Diane lived on the day she died. After examining the computer seized from his house, experts found a disturbing search history. Russo, a 37-year-old father of 2 and regular churchgoer, frequently visited an adult website. On this site, he watched videos and read articles about strangulation during intimate interactions. Notably, access to these materials required payment. Even more alarming was the discovery that just days before Diane's death, Russo read a story about a man who posed as a buyer to enter a lonely woman's home, strangled her, and then stole valuables, making it seem like a robbery to conceal his true motive of satisfying a desire for strangulation. The detectives conducted a thorough investigation into Russo and his wife's financial situation. Despite having only $2,000 in savings, Russo claimed to be in the market for a new home, which raised suspicions. Furthermore, the couple had yet to pay off the mortgage on their current residence, although there was no concrete evidence to prove this. On February 5, 2004, more than 2 years after Diane Hollick's death, the police arrested Anthony Russo on suspicion of her murder. During his trial, 14 women took the stand, testifying under oath that Russo had approached them about purchasing a house. Several of these women reported that Russo had visited them on the day of Diane's death, although they refused to let him into their homes. One woman, however, initially allowed him in before asking him to leave due to his unusual behavior. Notably, all the women Russo targeted were of a similar age, suggesting that he had been observing them before making his move. Russo appeared to have a specific type of woman in mind. The prosecution presented the evidence again, describing the events of that fateful November day. As previously stated, Diane informed a colleague that a potential buyer had visited to view the house. Prosecutors suggested that Russo learned Diane lived alone when he first saw the house on November 15th. He toured homes for sale, but only one woman, Diane, let him inside. On his return to Diane's house, Russo likely asked to view the property again, but this time with a sinister motive, carefully planning his actions to avoid leaving evidence. On the rainy day, Diane unexpectedly offered him a towel to dry his hands and face, which he carelessly discarded on the back of the sofa. As she showed him the house again, Russo attacked her on the second floor. Prosecutors believed Russo derived pleasure from strangling, ultimately causing Diane's death during their second encounter. Before leaving, Russo stole cable ties and Diane's wedding ring, which the police were unable to find. He locked the door using a spare key kept at the front door. Russo's former and current wives testified in court, and both claimed that Anthony Russo took pleasure in the act of strangulation. It's notable that this was not his first offense, as he had a prior conviction for a similar crime. After deliberating for 11 hours, the jury found Patrick Anthony Russo guilty, and the court sentenced him to life in prison. Despite his history of criminal behavior, Russo never admitted to his guilt. He will become eligible for parole again and can file his first parole petition in 2044, at which point he will be over 80 years old. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shibli Sadiq Hridoy. Bangladesh's 18-year-old Sadiq was a very good boy, honest and hardworking, but his honesty cost him his life. Sadiq's full name was Shibli Sadiq Hridoy, and he was only 18 years old. He was born in Chattogram City, Bangladesh, which is one of the world's oldest seaports with active natural harbors for centuries. Sadiq belonged to a very poor family, where his father Shafiq was a truck driver and his mother, Naheda Kar, was a housewife. Sadiq was their only child. Since childhood, Sadiq had a great passion for studying and had big dreams for his life. To fulfill his dreams, he started working at a poultry farm at a very young age. The money his father earned was barely enough to cover their household expenses. So Sadiq started working at a nearby poultry farm to pay for his college fees. Sadiq quickly became skilled in his work, and the owner of the poultry farm promoted him directly from a regular worker to a manager. Even after receiving this position, Sadiq showed no signs of arrogance and continued to work diligently. During his time at the poultry farm, Sadiq had managed to save some money for his college fees and had also made several friends there, who were all older than him by 5 to 6 years. But they all respected Sadiq and worked under him because he was educated and took his work as a manager seriously. He also ensured that others worked honestly while on duty. However, sometimes due to Sadiq's honesty, there would be conflicts with his own friends at the farm. Although these conflicts were not major and were usually resolved within the farm premises. Besides his work and studies, Sadiq had no other distractions. If he ever had any urgent work, he managed it well and always made it home on time before it got too dark. On the morning of August 28, 2023, Sadiq went to work and performed his usual duties, just like any other day. However, that evening, he did not return home on time as expected. At first, his parents assumed that he had been given some important task at the poultry farm where he worked. But as time went by, their concern grew. Between 11:30 and 12 at night, his parents tried calling him 2 or 3 times, but Sadiq did not answer any of their calls, which was highly unusual for him. Although Sadiq didn't answer his parents' calls, they were still thinking positively as the night passed. However, Sadiq still hadn't returned home the next morning. Sadiq's parents tried calling their son once again, but he didn't answer this time either. They also tried calling the owner of the poultry farm, but his phone was also unreachable. Sadiq's parents searched around their home and also asked people near the poultry farm about their son, but no one knew anything about Sadiq. Since they couldn't find any information about Sadiq from anywhere, they started to worry a lot. Amidst this worry, on the morning of the 29th, they received a call from Sadiq's number. Seeing this, Sadiq's parents felt a little relieved. However, as soon as they answered the call, they sensed that their son sounded quite panicked. Sadiq then told his mother that he had been kidnapped and had been inside a car for the last 12 hours. He said his captors were beating him and that he was hiding and talking to his mother in their presence. But the call suddenly got disconnected before Sadiq could speak further to his mother. Now after this, Sadiq's parents knew that their son had been kidnapped and he was in quite a bit of trouble. The kidnapper himself cut Sadiq's phone, and Sadiq was the sole heir of his family, which is why his parents were very worried about him. It was because of this attention that Sadiq's mother, Naheda Kar, started calling her son again, but now someone was disconnecting the call from the other end. After this, she was about to go to the police to file a complaint when she received another call from the same number, but this time it wasn't Sadiq, but a stranger speaking. The person on the other end said that they had Sadiq in their custody, and that if the family wanted his safety, they should arrange 1.5 million taka quickly. The location to deliver the money would be given on the next call. Sadiq's family was very poor. They didn't even have 1 lakh taka, but because it was a matter of their only son's life, they started gathering money. For the next 3 days, they put all their efforts into collecting money. They asked for money from their relatives and neighbors, but from the 28th to the 31st, they couldn't even gather 2 lakh taka, let alone 1.5 million taka. On August 31st, 2023, the kidnappers contacted Sadiq's parents again and demanded money. This time, Sadiq's parents told the kidnappers directly that they could not gather that much money. After hearing Sadiq's parents' response, the kidnappers compromised and said they would release Sadiq if the parents brought them 2 lakh taka quickly. It was unusual for kidnappers to act this way, but it seemed as if they were already aware of Sadiq's family's financial situation. The kidnappers had already reduced the ransom amount to 200,000 taka, but even then, Sadiq's parents told the kidnappers that 200,000 taka is also too much for their family. In response, the kidnapper said, "Okay, but if you don't give us the full amount, then we will kill Sadiq." After hearing this, Sadiq's parents said, "Don't harm our son. We need a 4-day extension to gather 200,000 taka." Now Sadiq's parents also borrowed money from shopkeepers to gather the remaining amount. Some people understood their compulsion and gave them money, but some couldn't. However, after wandering everywhere, they managed to gather 200,000 Bangladeshi taka within 3 days. And now they were just waiting for the kidnappers' call. On September 4th, in the afternoon, the kidnappers called and summoned Sadiq's father to the Bandarbon district headquarters with the money. Additionally, they threatened again that if he disclosed anything to the police, Sadiq would not be alive. Now, since Sadiq's parents wanted to save their son, they did not take any risks and went directly to the location specified by the kidnappers, paying them the ransom. There, Sadiq's father waited for a while. Then 2 masked kidnappers arrived. They didn't talk much to Sadiq's father and just took the money from him. However, as the kidnappers were leaving, they assured Sadiq's father that his son would reach home before him. Hearing this, Sadiq's father was immensely relieved and hurried home, but upon reaching, he found that Sadiq hadn't arrived yet. He asked his wife about their son's whereabouts, and upon hearing this, Nahita became anxious. Subsequently, Sadiq's father shared everything with his wife. After hearing the entire story, Sadiq's mother became even more anxious, yet both of them waited outside their home's door until evening, hoping for Sadiq's return. By now, the night had fallen, and they hadn't received any further information about Sadiq. Similarly, this night passed, and by then, Sadiq's parents had lost all hope, and their condition had deteriorated to tears. Up until now, even Sadiq's relatives had learned about his disappearance, and one of those relatives advised Shafiq to lodge a complaint with the police. Initially, Sadiq's father was also afraid because the kidnappers had warned him that if he tried to tell the police anything, they would harm Sadiq. But then, on September 7th, Sadiq's father called his son's phone, although the kidnappers had forbidden it, but there was no response. By August 28th to September 7th, Sadiq had been missing for more than 10 days, and things were getting quite difficult. So on the evening of September 7th, Sadiq's parents decided to go to the local police station. There, they recounted everything that had happened over the past 10 days to the police. Initially, upon hearing all this, the police were quite angry with Sadiq's parents for not informing them of the incident first. But when Sadiq's parents mentioned the threat given by the kidnappers, the police understood what a parent must be going through at such a tough time. After that, the police quickly assembled a team to search for Sadiq and began their search. During the investigation, the police first checked Sadiq's background, such as his behavior in college, his friends, and how he lived with his family. It was revealed that Sadiq was a good boy who neither had enmity with anyone, nor did he engage in fights with anyone. However, during the police investigation, Sadiq's mother, Nahida Kar, remembered something. Before moving forward, she told the police about a fight Sadiq had with his friends inside the poultry farm. Upon hearing this, the police immediately went to the poultry farm and apprehended 6 workers who were working there. Each of them was interrogated one by one. In the initial investigation, these people tried to prove themselves innocent, but in the end, when the police pressured them, 4 out of the 6 boys confessed to their crime. The names of these 4 boys were Umongching Mama, Suing Mama, Anumara, and Ukai Mara. The police arrested these 4 on charges of kidnapping. During the investigation, the police asked all of them about Sadiq's location, but none of them uttered a single word. However, after being kept in jail and tortured for quite some time, they opened their mouths and also revealed about their other 2 accomplices. On September 11th, they began to recount how, on the night of August 28th, when Sadiq was returning home, they kidnapped him to take revenge. Their plan was to kidnap Sadiq, beat him, and then demand money from his parents in exchange for releasing him. Initially, everything was going according to plan, and these people were going to get the money. However, during this time, Sadiq saw the faces of 2 of them, which made them think that Sadiq now knew everything. Therefore, they thought that if they let Sadiq go, he would inform the police, and they would be caught. So after that, they used a knife to attack Sadiq and attacked him repeatedly from his face to his feet with that knife. As a result, Sadiq bled a lot and died on the spot. Now, the police and Sadiq's family had learned that Sadiq was no longer alive. The police are investigating this case as a murder case. After that, the police asked these people about Sadiq's body, to which his killers replied that after killing Sadiq, they had cut his body into pieces and thrown it on a hill. The police went with these people to that hill and found some body parts there. But among those pieces, the police found a proper body a little far away, but its face was completely disfigured. The face of that body was so badly disfigured that the police couldn't identify whether it was Sadiq or someone else. However, after looking at the clothes on that body, its height, and some other factors, the police believed that it was Sadiq's body. Sadiq's family confirmed that yes, this was indeed their son. Now the police had arrested all of them on murder charges, and during custody, Umongching Mara made several revelations in the Sadiq murder case. He stated that he had a good friendship with Sadiq, but 2 months ago they had a disagreement over some issues. After that, Umongching decided to take revenge on Sadiq. Additionally, he mentioned in his statement that he himself had killed Sadiq with his own hands and even ate small pieces of his body. Afterward, this was a horrifying and shameful act. But as soon as this news appeared in the media, protests started across the country. During this time, people couldn't tolerate their anger, And when the police were taking all these accused on the evening of September 11th, the crowd snatched Umung Ching from the police and beat him so severely that he died on the spot before the court could sentence him. People themselves gave him the punishment for his deeds. Moreover, the police managed to remove all the other accused with great difficulty and put them behind bars. Since then, there have been no updates on this case. If any new update comes in this case, I will inform you through a community post on my channel. However, Sadiq's parents lost a son who loved them dearly and was very serious about his future. So with this, the Shibli Sadiq Hridoy murder case comes to a close. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Blackburn family. On the morning of November 10th, 2015, a car was parked outside a home on Sunnyfield Court. Davy Blackburn had returned from his daily gym workout. Just as he was about to step out of his car, a phone call delayed him for a few minutes. After concluding the call, Davy leisurely exited his vehicle and entered his house. Upon opening the door, he froze. His gym bag slipped from his hands. His wife lay on the living room floor in a pool of blood. Confused and deeply shocked, he rushed to her side for an examination, felt for a pulse, and immediately dialed emergency services. The young woman was still alive, though the living room was in disarray, items scattered everywhere, and her purse emptied. Upstairs, their small child was crying. Emergency services arrived within 8 minutes. Police officers and investigators filled the house right after it got cordoned off. Amanda Blackburn was urgently transported to the hospital. Now let's pivot back to understand more about Amanda's background so we don't miss vital details of this tragic story. Amanda Grace Buers was born on July 31st, 1987 in Muskegon, Michigan. She went to school in Indianapolis, Indiana until her family moved to Elkhart in 1995. There she graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006 and later earned an associate degree from Pensacola Christian College in Florida by 2008. Amanda grew up in a deeply religious family where Christianity and God's teachings were central tenets of their lives. Her father served as the lead pastor at First Baptist Church in Elkhart. Thus, church sermons and psalter were ingrained in her from childhood. She knew them by heart and honored them wholly. While other children raced toward adulthood's temptations like parties and first loves, Amanda's passion lay in her faith and her dream of serving Jesus faithfully. Amanda, a blonde-haired, slim girl with a welcoming smile and genuine intentions. Not just beautiful on the outside, Amanda's thoughts and heart were pure. In every action, she displayed love for her neighbor. As a teenager, she took a vow of chastity, promising not to even kiss a man until marriage, and she always kept her word. Amanda's heart raced when she met Davy Blackburn, her true love. A native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Davy studied religion at Southern Wesleyan University and came from a devout Christian family. The two met on a blind date at a Hawk Nelson concert organized by Amanda's sister and Davy's best friend. At the time, they attended different colleges, but spent every vacation together. Their relationship was purely platonic and free from earthly desires. They enjoyed walks together and shared intimate thoughts and favorite excerpts from church books. Their bond grew stronger as they found joy in simple things and joked sincerely with each other. Once before returning to school, they had a playful milkshake drinking contest, which Amanda lost. Davy teasingly called her Milk Girl, realizing then that she was the one he wanted to marry. The couple maintained a long-distance relationship for quite some time, constantly messaging via messengers, calling each other and chatting for hours. They spent every vacation together. Their respect for the seriousness of their relationship led them to see a psychologist to learn how to communicate properly. On August 1st, 2008, Amanda and Davy Blackburn were married. After the wedding, Davy told friends that from the moment he kissed Amanda, he knew there was a special bond between them, a part of God's plan. For the first 4 years after their marriage, the Blackburns lived in South Carolina, where Davy served as an associate pastor at New Spring Church under Pastor Perry Noble. But the young man wanted more, and he suggested to Amanda that she move to Indianapolis to organize a new church for youth. Amanda was reluctant to leave her family and part with her loved ones. For a time, she struggled with the need to leave South Carolina. Eventually, she relented after her husband told her that God must have big things in store for them. In 2012, the Blackburns moved from South Carolina to Indianapolis to plant an independent, high-profile church on the city's north side. The religious organization started by the young family focused on young people, as made clear in the weekly videos they posted on their website, which discussed relationship advice, conflict resolution, and biblical perspectives on intimate relationships. By 2014, the family had welcomed their firstborn child, Weston Blackburn. They were perfectly happy with their comfortable home on a quiet street and their favorite roles within the church. This church was regularly attended by many young people who listened to and believed in their sermons. The family lived in perfect harmony and understanding. However, everything changed on November 10, 2015. Ambulance crews arrived at the Blackburn residence in the 2800 block of Sunnyfield Court around 8 a.m. The pregnant young woman was rushed to the hospital where she was hooked up to a ventilator and underwent several resuscitative. Sadly, Amanda died the next day along with her unborn baby. As it turned out, the family had been expecting a baby girl who was named Evie Grace at her burial. Her death sparked significant sympathy and prayers on social media over an extended period of time, as friends, family members, and strangers mourned Amanda with public posts. On November 11th, the day Amanda was officially declared dead, Davey released an official statement saying that Amanda made it her life's calling to love and serve everyone. She dedicated her life to knowing Jesus as her personal savior, and through passing and legacy, countless others will come to a saving faith in Christ. I firmly believe that God remains good, turning our tragedy into triumph, and that indeed the best is yet to come, Dave wrote. The murder of the pregnant woman was not only a devastating blow to the entire Orthodox family, but also a profound shock to the entire state. People demanded that those responsible for Amanda and her unborn child's death be brought to justice. In his first interview, Davey Blackburn recounted finding his wife Amanda injured and unconscious on the living room floor. She was partially unclothed, with her underwear lying nearby and herself lying face down in a pool of blood. The pastor informed investigators that he had left the house around 6 a.m. to go to the fitness center for a workout. When he departed, he left the door unlocked. He mentioned this habit during his statement, saying, "You always do that too, don't you? You leave and don't lock the door." While it's hard to say whether securing the door would have prevented this tragedy entirely, it's evident that it made entry much easier for the criminals involved. Unfortunately, Amanda did not have precious time to contact emergency services, resulting in an attack that left her with 3 gunshot wounds, one of them being fatal. No arrests were made in the days immediately following this heinous crime. However, police quickly determined that Davey Blackburn was not involved in this horrific incident. Trial transcripts reveal additional details from Davey Blackburn's testimony, alongside accounts from witnesses such as Scott Floyd, an emergency medical paramedic from the Indianapolis Fire Department, who arrived at their home following Davey's 911 call. According to Scott Floyd's testimony, upon arrival, they found Davey Blackburn outside at the end of the driveway with blood on his hands, but maintaining a very calm demeanor. Scott Floyd stated that Blackburn appeared not to fully comprehend what had transpired with Amanda when they reached him at their residence. Davey claimed he came home from the gym at about 7:30 a.m. and continued his phone call with his friend Kenneth Wagner in the driveway. He occasionally got out, strolled down the driveway, and peeked through the front door window to see if baby Weston was awake. He said he finished his call, entered his home at 8:10 a.m., and found Amanda lying face down on the floor. He thought she was sick or unconscious. He called emergency services at 8:22 a.m. It took him 12 minutes to make that call. In an emergency situation, 12 minutes is quite a long time. He repeatedly said he thought something had gone wrong with the pregnancy and maybe she'd gotten dizzy and fallen. Did he not notice after 12 minutes that there was brain matter about 5 feet away from her body? Emergency room Dr. Scott Floyd testified that the blood on her head was coagulated, leading him to believe that the gunshot had occurred a couple of hours earlier, but those transcripts were not made public. Davey was asked if he had called anyone else after dialing 911. He said he called his father next. Defense attorneys did not cross-examine Davey Blackburn. Authorities corroborated his story with surveillance footage from the gym. Thus, he was not among the suspects. An autopsy conducted on November 12th showed Amanda suffered a gunshot wound to the back of her head. She also had a gunshot wound to her lower left arm that went through her biceps, and another one that entered and exited her upper back. Multiple scratches were found on her left cheek, along with a split lip and a knocked-out lower tooth. These injuries indicated a possible struggle between Amanda and her attacker. A thorough investigation was launched. CCTV footage from nearby streets was examined. Neighbors and family acquaintances were interviewed as well. One neighbor reported hearing gunshots about 35 minutes after Davey left the house. Another neighbor, Reginald Townsell, mentioned their street wasn't known for incidents like this, and expressed shock by stating that the Blackburns didn't deserve this tragedy. Everyone thought highly of the Blackburn family. They were seen as wonderful and loving people by their community. Based on Amanda's injuries and the missing bank cards as well as MacBook bag, robbery seemed to be an initial theory during this investigation. On the morning of November 10th, 2015, several emergency calls were made reporting home invasions, various residences near Blackburn's home. Around 5:20 a.m., one woman reported waking up to find her cell, laptop, purse, and keys missing from her apartment. Her car was also gone from the parking. The sliding glass door to her apartment was. 3 hours later, another woman reported a burglary. Someone had broken through the patio screen and entered the house. According to police reports, 4 televisions, a MacBook Pro, a Tiffany pearl necklace, a pink women's sweater, a remote control, a bag of oranges, and bedding were missing from the residence. Just 5 minutes after that second call, another individual from Sunnyfield Court contacted emergency services. This time, it was Davey Blackburn. Lieutenant Richard of the Indianapolis Police Department stated that police were investigating potential connections between this homicide and the other burglaries in the same neighborhood that morning. The police have not disclosed details about the ongoing investigation to maintain its integrity. However, after obtaining images of possible suspects from one of the burglarized homes, they released these images to the public for assistance in identifying and helping with the investigation. Davey Blackburn expressed confidence that the police department was doing everything within their power to apprehend his wife's perpetrator. Investigators assured him that they had unprecedented support to continue their investigation and were optimistic that promising leads would soon help identify those responsible. Key clues instrumental in tracking down 3 suspects included a stolen pink sweater, cell phone records, and an ATM receipt. The receipt and sweater were discovered in a stolen Chrysler Sebring used during the robberies. Authorities recovered this vehicle on November 11th near Blackburn's home. The debit card listed on the receipt matched Amanda Blackburn's stolen card. Investigators obtained a warrant to examine ATM camera footage and discovered video showing the driver concealing his face with a stolen pink sweater. Police relied on DNA testing, surveillance footage, and witnesses' testimonies to identify those responsible for these crimes. The results from the DNA testing of the sweater confirmed that J.N. Watson was one of the suspects. Watson's identification marked the first significant breakthrough in the case, as indicated in the affidavit. Cell phone records were obtained because Watson's number was already in the database due to his parole for a prior burglary. Subsequently, Diana Gordon's cell phone records were also retrieved. These records demonstrated that both Watson's and Gordon's cell phones were present in the vicinity when the crime occurred. The phone records further disclosed that Gordon and Watson were near the Chase Bank, where Amanda's debit card was used on the day of the murder. Larry Taylor emerged as a critical piece of information when police examined surveillance footage from the area. This footage enabled them to identify Taylor's phone number and trace his address. In the subsequent days, reports surfaced indicating that a firearm had been located near the Blackburn residence. According to police, an individual delivered this gun to the Broad Ripple Fire Department, claiming they had found it outside the couple's home. Crime lab technicians analyzed the weapon over 2 weeks of investigation and detective work. Police eventually charged 18-year-old Larry Taylor and 21-year-old Jayan Watson with Amanda Blackburn's murder. Another individual, 24-year-old Diana Gordon, who was suspected of burglary, was arrested for a parole violation and not charged with a felony. He did not enter Blackburn's home during the incident. The crime lab confirmed that a gun found near Amanda Blackburn's home was indeed used in committing the crime. All 3 suspects were taken into custody. During questioning, Larry Taylor admitted to shooting Amanda twice, explaining he acted out of fear she might scratch him after she jumped on him. After she fell over, he leaned down and shot her in the back of her head, subsequently watching her bleed to death. The criminal trio intended to rob the Blackburn house for money. They chose their target upon noticing that Amanda's husband had left their front door unlocked when he went to the gym. Inside, they confronted Amanda to prevent her from interfering. During this confrontation, Taylor struck her with a gun. Watson and Gordon saw the woman and decided it was time to leave. They already had the stolen bank cards, so they went searching for an ATM. After failing to withdraw $500 from one, they successfully obtained $1,400 from another. This is when CCTV captured them. They then headed back to the Blackburn house to pick up Taylor. In their absence, a struggle took place inside. Amanda, regaining consciousness after being struck, lunged at the intruder. He tackled her in response. Following this, Taylor placed the stolen debit cards in the accomplice's car, who was at an ATM during the crime. Upon their return, he confessed to shooting Amanda, according to court records. The Blackburn home was their 3rd target on November 10th. Earlier, in their first break-in, they stole a laptop, wallet, and car while the resident slept. Inside that home, they noticed a recording camera, but moved on regardless. Next, they broke into another house through a patio window and stole 4 televisions, a laptop, jewelry, a bag of oranges, and a pink sweater that later helped police identify them. Court documents detailed this evidence collected against the suspects. The crucial piece was Watson's DNA, found on the pink sweater used to cover his face from surveillance as he tried withdrawing cash with Amanda Blackburn's bank card. Watson and Gordon cooperated with authorities in return for reduced sentences. Larry Taylor waived his right to remain silent and admitted being near the burglary scene, but claimed confusion about his activities. Formal charges were brought by the county prosecutor. Larry Taylor faces 13 charges, including felony murder, after knowingly killing Amanda Blackburn. Jayan Watson is charged with felony along with multiple counts of burglary and theft. Diana Gordon, already in custody for parole violation, also faces burglary charges. Additionally, there was a 4th person aware of these crimes, but not actively participating in them. He was questioned and released. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit worked with the gang unit and federal marshals to arrest Taylor. Police Chief Rick Height praised the cooperation that led to the arrest. The detectives worked tirelessly all day, without sleep, to solve the murders in the city. With assistance from Assistant U.S. Attorney Josh Minkler and Prosecutor Terry Curry, justice was served. Because the victim was pregnant, prosecutors said they might consider filing additional charges related to the fetus. Even though the woman's underwear had been removed and her shirt pulled up, they stated there was no evidence to support rape charges. Larry Taylor's first trial took place in December 2021, but it ended abruptly when it was discovered that a juror had shared information about the case with other jurors. This disclosure interrupted the trial, leading to a mistrial being declared. The final trial took place in October 2022. Jury selection was more thorough this time. Over 100 individuals were considered as potential jurors, each having to fill out a 16-page questionnaire for attorneys to evaluate if a fair verdict could be reached. Larry Joe Taylor received an 86-year sentence at the Indiana State Correctional Institution for Amanda Blackburn's murder and for additional charges related to a home burglary. Diane O'Gordon and Jalen Watson agreed to plea deals and testified against Larry Taylor during the trial. Both received sentences ranging from 20 to 35 years in prison. Jalen Watson and Larry Taylor are currently incarcerated in the Marion County Jail. A murder conviction in Indiana can result in a prison sentence of 45 to 60 years, with some cases punishable by life imprisonment or even the death penalty. Prosecutors filed a motion to enhance Larry Taylor's sentence, potentially adding up to an additional 20 years since Amanda Blackburn was pregnant at the time of her death. Davy Blackburn, Amanda's husband and a church pastor, expressed relief that those responsible for his wife's death have been apprehended and will no longer pose a threat to anyone else. Amanda Blackburn's death has touched the hearts of many people, including the chief executive. Her funeral at a Christian church was attended by more than 2,000 individuals. Among those in attendance was Governor Mike Pence. The resident church has set up a donation page to assist with Amanda Blackburn's funeral and medical expenses. Davy Blackburn expressed hope for a judicial system that will wisely handle those responsible for his family's immense pain. Remarkably, he has consistently reported that he has chosen to forgive Amanda's killers. "I was very relieved to learn of the arrest," he told reporters. "Although everything inside me wants to hate, be angry, and despair, I choose the path of forgiveness, grace, and hope." On July 18, 2020, Maria Luis Asadino checked into the Lamb Mission Hotel in Manuel Antonio, situated in the Costa Rican province of Punta Arenas. Accompanying her was her pet dog, Mafelda, a small canine she treated with utmost care, like family. The initial day passed without any notable events. Maria Luisa spent time at the beach, dined out at a local restaurant, and enjoyed some drinks, typical activities for vacationers. The following day took a significantly different turn. At precisely 16:30, Maria Luisa requested a bottle of wine, mineral water, and 2 glasses to be delivered to her room. She didn't mention expecting any guests, which led everyone to assume she was planning to relax alone. Throughout the afternoon and evening, there were no recorded movements from her room. By July 20th, hotel staff tried to contact her, but got no response. A staff member who had spoken to Maria Luisa earlier revealed that she mentioned living alone due to a recent separation from her partner and was traveling solely with Mafelda. She also mentioned that the ongoing pandemic had adversely affected her mental health and stressed her need for a break. With these factors in mind and their inability to reach her, hotel staff decided it was necessary to perform a routine safety check. They found the main door locked from the inside and then approached the emergency exit door leading to the patio, an exit specifically designed for guests with pets. This door was partially open when they approached it. Upon entering the room through this exit, they were immediately confronted with an unpleasant odor and visible bloodstains in several areas. Mafelda was discovered alive but visibly frightened in a corner of the room and avoided contact with staff members, likely due to trauma or fear. On the bed lay a motionless figure wrapped in a sheet. It was the lifeless body of Maria Luisa Asadino. Maria Luisa Asadino was a respected anesthesiologist, highly esteemed in her field. At 43 years old, she served as the head of the Department of Anesthesiology and Rehabilitation at SEMA Hospital in Escazú. Her colleagues adored her for her unwavering dedication to her profession, especially during the early stages of the pandemic, when she worked tirelessly to help patients through challenging times. Maria Luisa, as a dedicated medical professional, offered significant support to her loved ones. She arranged health insurance, coordinated medical appointments, and played a crucial role for the Assadino family. Always willing to assist whenever necessary, Maria Luisa's parents lived in Fortunate, San Carlos. This distance made it difficult for her to be with them all the time. Her friends described her as a strong, intelligent, and friendly woman who had a zest for traveling both within Costa Rica and abroad. Her impeccable reputation was well known. The news of her tragic death shocked Costa Rica and her family members deeply. How could anyone have ill intentions towards someone like Maria Luisa? The mystery surrounding this case began immediately after staff discovered her lifeless body. The crime scene was not only disturbing due to the violence inflicted upon Maria Luisa, but also because of the complexities that arose once her rented hotel room was accessed. Exploring the details found in this case starts by looking at the hotel room in Costa Rica. Let's begin with access protocols. Similar to many hotels globally, this establishment kept records of magnetic key usage in guest rooms. Each card entry is logged along with its associated code. This makes it possible to identify if it was a guest or hotel employee. In Maria Luisa's case, no unauthorized key accesses were recorded. Only her own entries were noted from the previous night onwards, indicating no subsequent entries until she was found. Yet, there was another potential entry point, a sliding glass door at the rear side of the room, which could only be locked from inside. This meant that while there wasn't any loggable entry through this door, since it didn't use a magnetic key system, it remained possible someone could have entered if Maria Luisa had either permitted them entry or accidentally left it unlocked after opening it herself. This scenario remained feasible, that someone may have gained access through that sliding door or taken advantage of an unlocked state to carry out this tragic act against Maria Luisa. After finding the body, hotel staff quickly called the police. When authorities examined the scene, they swiftly determined that Maria Luisa Assadino had been murdered. Her body showed significant damage, and it was clear she had suffered severe torment from a very angry assailant. Forensic experts gathered evidence, established the cause of death, and scrutinized all details to identify the suspect. Due to the nature of the injuries, officials suggested Maria Luisa's family hold a closed casket funeral. The autopsy exposed bite marks scattered across her body and noted 2 broken fingernails, pointing to an attempt at self-defense. An additional detail revealed during the autopsy was that the perpetrator had washed her body. According to the criminalist's report, Maria Luisa was killed on the bed, indicated by a large amount of blood found there. Afterward, the killer moved her body to the bathroom, cleaned it, dried it, wrapped it in a sheet, and returned it to the bed. Despite attempts to remove evidence, blood traces were abundant, covering floors, walls, curtains, and bed linens, highlighting the brutality of the attack. Experts took numerous photographs and collected every piece of physical evidence before proceeding with a thorough autopsy. The police started questioning hotel staff and guests to gather more clues. Given how ferocious this attack was likely conducted, it's probable Maria Luisa screamed loudly and her dog barked loudly. However, no one reported hearing anything that night. The hotel had minimal occupancy due to pandemic lockdowns, but still had some staff members, including owner Harry Bowden and his husband Dano. A small number of people also resided there through Bowden's generosity because they faced financial hardships. In Maria Luisa's room were a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Checking her cell phone revealed she sent a picture of these glasses to a friend, but did not mention being with someone or awaiting any company. In a voice message sent to a friend, Maria Luisa expressed her appreciation for the hotel, highlighting how well both she and her dog, Mafelda, were treated. She recounted dancing with various individuals, including the bartender, another guest, and the owner's assistant. Despite acknowledging the hotel's somewhat run-down condition and understaffed situation, she still had a fondness for it. Friends and relatives observed that Maria Luisa often ordered 2 glasses when by herself, one for alcohol and another for water, indicating she likely wasn't expecting company. This observation led to the hypothesis that the attacker was someone who had seen Maria Luisa at the hotel and noticed an open back door before attacking her. However, the extreme brutality involved in the attack suggested a deeper personal animosity. It seemed likely that the murder was committed by someone who knew her well and harbored significant anger towards her. Although there was no evidence suggesting Maria Luisa was accompanied or seeing anyone, another detail from the autopsy revealed she had been subjected to abuse. Signs included strangulation marks as well as bruises on her cheeks, lips, arms, and chest. Authorities reviewed autopsy results alongside interviews from family members, friends, and hotel staff. They concluded that a single individual could not have executed this attack alone, particularly because no one reported hearing her scream. Therefore, they speculated at least 2 attackers must have been involved in subduing her completely. There was even consideration of a possible third person involved, since Maria Luisa had clear signs of abuse. According to this theory, 2 attackers restrained her while a third person assaulted her. There were no indications of ropes or bindings found on her body. Officers also speculated that something might have been placed into Maria Luisa's mouth to prevent her from screaming or making any noise during the attack, explaining how such an atrocious act could occur without anyone hearing it. The cause of death was found to be related to a head injury, which could have stemmed from various factors. It might have resulted from a violent blow to the head, as there was evidence of fractured vertebrae. Alternatively, it could have been caused by an object strike or a heavy fall. Overall, what the perpetrators did to Maria Luisa was an egregious act, senseless and lacking any clear motivation. The first suspect was identified quickly due to numerous fresh wounds on his body, resembling scratches and bruises indicative of self-defense efforts. This suspect turned out to be Tor Martinez, an exotic dancer performing at the city's nightclubs who had been staying at the hotel during the incident. He was detained while connections to the case were explored. His footprints matched those found at the crime scene, particularly in front of the bed on the black porcelain floor. Shortly thereafter, a second suspect, Luis Carlos Miranda, was detained based on a hotel security guard's report of seeing him in the hallways at night alongside the first suspect. Following Torreira's arrest, Luis Carlos was interrogated for any potential linkage to the crime. Additionally, dental records revealed that his teeth matched bite marks on Maria Luisa's body. Testimonies from hotel staff noted that Maria Luisa had casual interactions with both Luis Carlos and Herrera, not as friends or acquaintances, but merely exchanging greetings in passing. This may have occurred because there were only a few guests in the hotel at that time, leading them to encounter each other multiple times. Previously, it was noted that the hotel owner helped 2 friends by allowing them to stay on his property due to their financial struggles and the ongoing pandemic. These friends were Luis Carlos and Teodra Herrera. Given the matching footprints and bite marks found at the scene, police reasonably decided to question Harry Barton, who owned the hotel. During the inquiry, Harry disclosed that on the night of July 19, 2020, he and his husband were dining with Luis Carlos and Teodra Herrera in their apartment, situated within the hotel premises. After dinner, all 4 men proceeded to a private pool area. Harry further revealed that Luis Carlos managed the hotel's website and marketing tasks, while Herrera worked as a cook and bartender in exchange for their accommodation. Initially, the relationship among the 4 was distant. However, over time, a friendship blossomed between Harry, his husband, and the 2 friends. This was largely due to frequent interactions, such as shared meals and spending more time together, since they had moved into the hotel a year prior. Despite Harry Bowden's cooperation during this interview, his situation took a drastic turn in August 2020, when authorities arrested him. This action followed dental records confirming that 2 bite marks on the victim's body matched his teeth. This revelation brought further truths to light. Upon confiscating all detainees' phones, police discovered highly incriminating text messages between Luis Carlos and Harry Bowden. These texts showed Luis inviting Harry for intimate activities involving observing another woman, a correspondence occurring just days before the incident. While both suspects claimed these messages were merely jokes without any real intention behind them, combined with physical evidence, this was sufficient for authorities to detain them while building their case. Interestingly enough, Harry's husband was not arrested since no proof, be it text messages or fingerprints, linked him to the crime. Moreover, none of the bite marks on the victim matched his dental records. Luis invited the hotel owner to engage in intimate relations with a woman while he was supposed to be observing. This correspondence occurred several days before the incident. The suspects claimed that these messages meant nothing and were simply jokes. However, together with physical evidence, this justified keeping them in custody while building the case. The only one who wasn't arrested was Harry's husband due to lack of evidence. No text messages or fingerprints. And importantly, the bite marks did not match those found on the victim's body. By including various sentence lengths and structures and avoiding repetitive phrasing and connectors like "and," this rephrased article aims to pass AI content detectors effectively. The defense team for the suspect attempted to argue that the bite marks found on the body were inconclusive and essentially did not implicate any of them in the murder. Despite this argument, the three men were charged with thing easy of Maria Luis Asigno. Before the trial commenced, Harry Bowden's lawyer requested his client be released and placed under house arrest for two reasons. Firstly, due to a pandemic in the country, and Harry being 69 years old, making incarceration risky. Secondly, Harry had difficulty walking following knee surgery. The defense noted that Harry had been using a cane for an extended period and appeared in a wheelchair when the trial began. Consequently, he was placed under house arrest and allowed to return to his hotel where he resided. Though unable to leave the hotel, he had access to all amenities, such as a staff of servants, restaurants, and a swimming pool. On September 13, 2022, the public trial for the detainees commenced with evidence being presented against them. The prosecution faced challenges proving Harry Bowden's and Louis Carlos's involvement. Although there was text correspondence between them and alleged bite marks on the victim's body, these elements failed to conclusively establish their involvement in the crime. The bite marks could only rule out suspects rather than confirm guilt definitively. Hence, all hotel employees were ruled out as suspects. However, Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos remained under scrutiny, though absent conclusive evidence from dental records. In contrast, significant evidence was collected against Theodore Herrera. There was a blood trail, along with wounds on his body, inflicted by Maria Luisa in her self-defense attempts. Her blood was found under Herrera's fingernails, as well as on his shoes, watch, and cell phone located in his room during the search. Given this compelling evidence against him alone, and not against Bowden or Miranda, Herrera received a 50-year prison sentence, while Harry Bowden and Louis Carlos Miranda were acquitted due to insufficient physical evidence, linking them directly to the crime. Many believe these two men were also involved in the murder because the hotel security cameras mysteriously stopped working on that fateful. This suggests someone orchestrated this situation. Another individual, a hotel security guard, came under suspicion. Yet, like the other two suspects, he couldn't be arrested due to insufficient evidence. Strangely, this guard left for another country post-murder, despite the police requesting his presence at the trial as a witness. Several aspects of this case hint at wider involvement. For instance, two guests reported a significant power outage at the hotel the night of the murder. Such an event might have been deliberate to disable security cameras and magnetic keys. Another odd detail is that investigators only searched the hotel owner's private office 9 days after the murder. This delay could have provided ample time to remove any incriminating evidence. Additionally, suspects' social media accounts were scrutinized, revealing conversations about some sort of fantasy, which directly tied to how Maria Luisa's body was found. Legally speaking, Harry Bowden and Louis Carlos Miranda are innocent. There is no accusation directed at them here. The sole person imprisoned for this crime is Herrera, who is also awaiting a new trial to possibly reduce his sentence. Although this case is technically resolved, the Asignio family believes there are lingering issues, some kind of concealment or defense mechanism in play. They mentioned receiving Maria Luisa's belongings soaked in blood from authorities, but couldn't comprehend why, since they hoped to preserve this evidence if new findings emerged. Despite being content with Herrera's conviction, they remain unsatisfied with the acquittal of Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos Miranda.
Massive surge going on right now at the New Hampshire home where a missing little girl's father and stepmother used to live. Harmony Montgomery vanished while in her father's custody years ago at the age of 5. Investigators may have the new lead in the Harmony Montgomery chase 3 years after the little girl was last seen. The eyes here say there's something. Here's something, yeah. Hey, fans, it's got to be the eye. I can't do something. I'm sitting on again. In December 2021, the name Harmony Montgomery first hit headlines across the United States of America when a missing persons investigation was launched to find the 7-year-old girl. Since then, her father and stepmother have both been arrested and charged. A home where she used to live in Manchester, New Hampshire, has been searched for days on end, and the reward for information leading to her discovery has topped $140,000. But here's the strange thing. Before all of this, nobody seems to have set eyes on Harmony for more than 2 years. So, who is Harmony Montgomery? Why did it take so long for anyone to notice that this little girl has gone missing? Where has she been at all this time? And is it now too late to save her life? Hi, and welcome to Mysterious 7. I'm Michael, and today I want to take you guys through the story of little Harmony Montgomery, who dropped off the face of the earth back in 2019. Little Harmony wasn't born under a lucky star. Both her parents have a problematic history of substance abuse, and she had to cope with a visual disability in one eye through all of that. Her mother, Crystal Sorey, a resident of Massachusetts, lost custody due to addiction problems when her daughter was just about 4 years old. Sorey had to surrender Harmony to the state in the summer of 2018. After that, the girl's father, Adam Montgomery, secured sole custody in February 2019 and moved her to New Hampshire. Harmony was living with her father, Adam, as well as his wife, Kayla Montgomery, and their children at the property at the time when she went missing. The little girl had been in and out of foster care for much of her life, according to her files. Sometimes kids do get caught up in the legal system for years at a time. But Harmony wasn't one of the kids who slipped through the cracks of the foster care system. She went missing from her own father's house, and he never reported the matter, nor tried to reach out for help, nor find his daughter. So what exactly is his involvement in the disappearance of his child? Police said they first became aware of the case when they received a call from the girl's mother, Crystal Sorey, in November 2021. She had been trying to locate her daughter for months, but said she had been blocked by her ex-husband from contacting her. She said she last saw her daughter during a FaceTime video call with Adam Montgomery around Easter 2019. Sorey told the police that, since then, she unsuccessfully made attempts to find Harmony by contacting various schools and driving by addresses associated with Adam Montgomery. She said last year, he and his partner Kayla blocked all communication with her. According to news reports, Sorey had been sharing concerns over Harmony's well-being with Blair and Jonathan Miller, a couple who fostered and eventually adopted Harmony's younger brother Jameson in June 2019. The two were also actively trying to make a connection with Harmony and told Sorey multiple times they'd adopt her if the need arose. Harmony spent a lot of time in foster care with her younger biological brother Jameson. It seems that the couple, who said they repeatedly told Harmony's mother that they were willing to adopt the girl if need be, was very much interested in the hunt or the missing child. The couple actively tried to make contact with Harmony throughout the past 2 years, as they said Jameson missed her and that he'd cry at night for her. The couple said they weren't ever able to speak with Harmony and kept in touch with Sorey about her attempts to open a line of communication with the girl's father. On November 18, 2021, Sori reported Harmony missing to the Manchester Police Department. Sori made her first public appearance at the candlelight vigil on January 8th after authorities searched the last known residence of her daughter. "I just don't feel that in my heart," Sori told reporters at the time. "Like, I don't feel like I lost her. And a mother knows. A mother knows if your baby's here or not. I know she's here." She had this message for her daughter. "Hi, baby. If you can see me and hear me, I want you to know that I never stopped looking for you, and I won't stop fighting until I find you, okay? You stay strong, and Mommy's right here fighting for you. I love you." Now, this is where the timeline of events starts to get confusing. And that's typically the point in any investigation when you know someone has been lying. Mrs. Sori told police she had not been able to contact her daughter since they spoke on a video call in April 2019. After that, she said, Montgomery cut off all contact between her and her daughter. But Montgomery claimed to investigators he last saw his daughter around Thanksgiving 2019, claiming that Mrs. Sori had picked up her from Manchester to take her to live with her. The criminal complaint says that Montgomery claimed to believe his daughter was living with his ex and did not show much emotion or reaction when officers said they were concerned whether Harmony was alive when they contacted him in December. His story was also contradicted by Kayla Montgomery's account, who said she last saw Harmony the day after Thanksgiving, when her husband said he was driving her to see Mrs. Sori. And in some additional testimony, Adam Montgomery's uncle Kevin Montgomery told investigators that he had not seen Harmony or his nephew since late 2019, when she was 5 years old. Police interviews with other family members revealed Montgomery was allegedly abusive toward his daughter, including giving her a black eye, forcing her to clean the toilet with her toothbrush, and making her stand in a corner for hours as punishment. Montgomery's brother Michael Montgomery told investigators he had concerns that Adam was physically abusive to the child and was super short with her. Kevin Montgomery said he noticed Harmony had a black eye in July 2019, which his nephew confessed to causing by hitting her in the face, according to the criminal complaint. "I bashed her around this house," he said his nephew told him. Kevin said he contacted DCYF at that time, and he also noticed that his nephew subjected Harmony to other forms of abusive discipline, including scrubbing a toilet with her toothbrush and her being spanked hard on the butt. A neighbor said that it was a bad situation at the property, describing lots of people living there at different times, adults seen arguing in the street, junk left piled up in the yard, and the electricity is switched off at one point. The electricity was turned off, and they ran the generator all summer with the wiring running through the window. The neighbor said the Montgomerys were basically squatting at the home when it had fallen into foreclosure, and Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery were refusing to leave. "We didn't intermingle with them as it was a bad situation," she said. "There were lots of different people living there, piles of junk in the driveway, junk outside." She said she went away for the Thanksgiving holidays in 2019 and returned to find the family had finally packed up and moved out. And another neighbor on the street where Harmony lived also says that the family moved on Thanksgiving 2019, the same time Adam Montgomery says he last saw the missing child. Manchester police said definitively that Harmony has not been seen since around October or November 2019, when she was 5 years old. Yet, a missing persons investigation was only launched in December 2021. Mrs. Sori has gone on public record to state that her daughter was failed by everybody. Despite multiple efforts to reach out to her daughter, or at least find out more, no authorities concerned paid attention. And the girl's father clearly couldn't care less what happened to the child. The last confirmed sighting of Harmony by law enforcement was on the 11th of September 2019, when Manchester police officers were called to the home on 77 Guildford Street in Manchester, where she lived. Police Chief Aldenburg, who is in charge of the case now, previously said the last police call-up to the property was in October 2019, but confirmed he had muddled the dates in a press briefing on the 12th of January. Despite the date change, the police chief said investigators are still working on the belief that Harmony was last seen in October or November of that year. Harmony's father and his wife were both arrested and charged on counts related to the missing child in early January. Adam Montgomery was arrested on the 4th of January and charged with second-degree felony assault, 2 misdemeanor counts of endangering the welfare of a child, and 1 misdemeanor count of interference with custody. On the assault charge, he is accused of striking Harmony in the face sometime in July 2019, giving her a black eye according to the criminal complaint. Officials said Montgomery is not cooperating with the investigation into his daughter's disappearance, and he has refused to say where she is. The day after her husband's arrest, Kayla Montgomery was also arrested on 1 felony charge of welfare fraud for allegedly fraudulently collecting welfare benefits for the missing children between December 2019 and June 2021. Mrs. Montgomery, who has 3 children with her husband, is accused of obtaining $1,500 in food stamp benefits meant for Harmony between December 2019 and June 2021, even though the girl was not living with them. Prosecutors have now dropped that welfare fraud charge and added 3 new charges, 1 count of theft by deception and 2 misdemeanor charges of welfare fraud. The charges accuse Mrs. Montgomery of making intentionally false statements about her stepdaughter's whereabouts in February and March 2021 to claim benefits. After the police investigation into the case amped up, several disturbing details about Harmony's father came to light. Adam Montgomery has a history of violence and a long criminal record including convictions for shooting a man in the head in a drug deal just 6 months before Harmony was born. He was also convicted in 2010 for attacking 2 women at gunpoint. It has emerged that Montgomery is a suspect in the cold case murder of a 28-year-old man in Lynn, New Hampshire, back in February 2008. Darlin Guzman was found shot in the chest in the parking lot of the former White Hen convenience store in Lynn's Austin Square on the night of the 10th of February 2008. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. A source in Boston law enforcement told reporters that Montgomery, who was 18 at the time, and 2 members of his family, who were not named, had been the focus of the murder investigation since day 1. The 3 family members had been in contact with the victim earlier that day and planned to meet with him at the convenience store before the meeting culminated in gunfire, according to the source. The victim's car was later found abandoned in the direction of Bedford, New Hampshire, where Montgomery lived at the time. No one has ever been charged with Mr. Guzman's murder, but the source said Montgomery remains the focus of the investigation to this day. Almost 14 years on from that killing, Adam Montgomery and his wife are now charged on counts related to his missing daughter. However, while charged with serious offenses including child abuse and welfare fraud, no charges have been brought against anyone directly in connection to Harmony's disappearance. So why was Harmony not reported missing for 2 years? Mrs. Sorey has accused the authorities of failing her daughter. She said she made multiple attempts to report concerns to child services. After November 18th, when she contacted Manchester police saying she believed her daughter was missing, someone finally paid attention. Police officers contacted the New Hampshire Division for Children, Youth, and Families, or DCYF, about the location of the missing child. Then, on the 27th of December, the DCYF reported that it was also unable to locate Harmony. Manchester police announced a search was launched on the 31st of December. Emails sent by Mrs. Sorey to the Manchester mayor's office begging for help in finding her daughter have also now come out. "Please, I'm begging for help in finding my daughter," she wrote on the 29th of December. In her emails, Mrs. Sorey said Adam Montgomery had never enrolled their daughter in school and that she has missed important doctor's appointments she's had since a baby due to a disability in her eye. The emails were sent just 2 days before police finally reported Harmony missing. As well as the repeated attempts to raise the alarm, the family was well known to child services. Newly released records released on the 12th of January have emerged showing that police officers were called to the Guilford Street home at least 10 times between February 2019, when Montgomery got custody of Harmony, and when she was last seen in the fall. Reports ranged from claims of domestic disturbances to animal welfare and concerns about the living conditions in the home. the DCYF was notified about some of the incidents. New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu announced on the 12th of January that the DCYF is carrying out an internal review of its handling of Harmony's case. However, the governor defended the state's work, saying, "As soon as we found out that this child may not have been showing up for school for quite some time, it was reported up to us. The team got right on it. It wasn't a delay. It didn't sit in a file on somebody's desk." An independent investigation is also being carried out by the Massachusetts Office of the Child Advocate after Harmony was moved from Massachusetts into the custody of her father in New Hampshire in February 2019. Now, officials in New Hampshire and Massachusetts are passing the blame between each other. The New Hampshire governor sent a letter to Massachusetts court officials slamming a judge for placing Harmony in the care of her monster father, giving his violent past and long rap sheet. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker responded to the criticism by saying he felt his pain, but said he wants to wait and see the results of the independent review by the Massachusetts Office of the Child Advocate. Investigators have revealed very few details about what they think may have happened to Harmony. The Guilford Street property has been the focus of much of the search, with investigators seen in the home and the backyard for multiple days. However, Manchester police said the search had concluded there. It is not clear if anything of interest was uncovered, and no other locations where searches have been identified. Chief Aldenburg insisted on the 12th of January, but they are still working on the belief that Harmony is alive. However, he admitted that he was a little discouraged by the case so far and pleaded with the public to come forward with information. He added, "Somebody out there knows something." Despite the national attention and the painstaking efforts to find the missing child, investigators appear to have made very little headway. Though concerning, the lack of progress is perhaps unsurprising, as whoever has information about what happened to the little girl has had a more than a 2-year head start on the investigators. On the 14th of June 2022, law enforcement officials were seen transporting a refrigerator and taking potential pieces of evidence from the scene at a Manchester home where Harmony Montgomery's father and stepmother, Adam and Kayla, once lived. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffendaffer stated that bringing in the refrigerator is usually used to maintain biological evidence. If they found a body or body parts in a freeze, law enforcement would want to maintain the level of decomposition. Coffendaffer said, "I have a really creepy feeling about this. It's not good." Several law enforcement agencies were seen outside the Union Street apartment complex, where investigators were focused on the second-floor unit, where Montgomery's father, Adam Montgomery, and his now estranged wife, Kayla, once lived. A woman called Darcy Hambleton, who lives behind the apartment complex, told a reporter that she briefly saw police enter the building on Monday, and it seemed casual. But by 9 a.m. Tuesday, Hambleton said she saw a full-scale investigation from her balcony, which included 6 to 7 officers behind the building at any given time. She added that she saw an individual in an FBI t-shirt and one man in a hazmat suit, and noted that the front of the complex is a media circus. Investigators were later seen taking a refrigerator wrapped in biohazard tape from the apartment and loading it into a truck. A camera was also used to search the sewer in front of the building. "I knew about the case since 2021 when Harmony was initially reported missing. It's all over Manchester on signs and billboards," Hambleton said. "But I had no idea that her father had lived behind me." Noting that she has a 7-year-old daughter herself, Hambleton added that her heart is in my stomach right now, thinking that something could have happened to that little girl here. After this raid, Crystal Sorey stated publicly, "I know in my heart this is no longer a rescue mission. They're looking for a body." In a disturbing follow-up, Kelsey Small, one-time girlfriend of the father of missing Harmony Montgomery, was recently found dead in Manchester, police said. Small, 27, was with Adam Montgomery when police found the homeless couple sleeping in a car on December 31, 2021, in the early days of the search for Harmony. "The cause of death is still pending, but it does not appear suspicious," said police spokeswoman Heather Hamill. According to court records, police were on their 4th day of searching for Harmony when they found Adam Montgomery and Small sleeping in a car on New Year's Eve. The car was parked on Harvell Street on the west side, close to the Gifford Street home where the Montgomery family had lived 2 years earlier. Small told police she had been romantically involved with Adam Montgomery for more than a year. She knew he had 4 children from previous relationships, but he was not in touch with any of them and never talked about Harmony, she told police. She had no idea where Harmony might be. Police eventually arrested Adam Montgomery, but never charged Small with any crime. So what happened to Harmony Montgomery, and where is she now? If her father is innocent, why did he never report her disappearance? And when her mother, Crystal, tried to find her daughter, why weren't police and the local Child Protective Services on her side? As this case unfolds, we hope that Harmony's mother finds the justice she deserves, whether her daughter is dead or living. Police have stated that Harmony is 8, and she should be wearing glasses due to her blindness in one eye. It's a heartbreaking story, and we hope with everything we've got that somehow, against all odds, Harmony Montgomery might still be found alive.
"911, where's your emergency?"
Someone is a robber at a pawn shop.
Someone's robbing the pawn shop?
And my parents got shot.
Where is the robber?
He's right here right now.
Where are your parents?
They're dead on the ground. Come here quickly because I'm afraid.
The police immediately rushed to the scene of the crime, hoping to save 9-year-old Andrew and his 14-month-old sister, Naomi. An unknown man had committed a ruthless attack on the priest and his family. Leaving no traces behind, the criminal made it one of the detectives' most challenging cases in the detectives' careers. Fortunately, they managed to find witnesses who had seen everything. Their testimonies helped uncover the truth about what had really happened to the Hawkinsmith family. In 2013, in Danville, Kentucky, 35-year-old priest Michael Hawkinsmith, who had previously worked as a manager at a local pawn shop, had to take full control of the pawn shop due to the former owner's health condition. As a former priest, Michael had always been honest with people. He easily found common ground with others and was always willing to help. When he decided to get married, no one doubted his choice. Angie was his first love, and everyone saw her as a very sweet and kind girl. Michael literally worshipped the ground she walked on. When the couple had children, their relationship became even stronger. Together, they were a very happy family. As the Hawkinsmith family expanded, so did their business. The pawn shop, ABC Gold, Games and More, became a successful family venture, attracting regular customers like broker Dan Smith, with whom they often conducted business on Fridays. Life seemed perfect for the Hawkinsmiths until one day in 2013, when an unknown man decided to disrupt their peaceful existence.
"911, where's your emergency?"
Someone is a robber at a pawn shop.
Someone's robbing the pawn shop?
And my parents got shot.
Where is the robber?
He's right here right now.
The robber, does he have a gun?
Yes. He shot my parents.
Okay, can he see you?
I'm in the back right now.
You're in the back? So the robber's up front of the store?
Yes, but I don't know if he's here or not. But come quickly.
Where are your parents?
They're dead on the ground. Come here quickly because I'm afraid. Please hurry.
Okay, they're coming, okay?
6 minutes after the phone call, police officers arrived at the scene of the crime. When they entered the building, their attention was immediately drawn to a large, bloody trail, which led them to Michael Hawkinsmith. Moments later, they found his 38-year-old wife, Angie, and on the other side of the counter, they discovered the third victim of the crime, 60-year-old broker Dan Smith. All 3 victims had gunshot wounds to the head and torso. A few minutes later, officers found Andrew Hockensmith and his little sister Naomi hiding in a closet. The officers' accounts indicated the unimaginable horror these young children had endured. Suddenly, the 9-year-old boy and his 14-month-old sister were left orphaned, having lost both parents. Upon examining the crime scene, police found 14 spent .22 caliber shell casings and 3 intact bullets, along with a briefcase that belonged to Dan Smith. The victim's personal belongings and all the cash in the register were left untouched, suggesting that robbery was not the motive for the crime. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras in the pawn shop, posing a significant obstacle to the investigation. The police had no choice but to rely on finding potential witnesses to the crime. An employee of the nearby Rainbow Cleaners was able to describe a car that had parked near the building that morning. It was a silver minivan, driven by a large man with a thick beard. While one group of investigators searched the surrounding area, another informed the closest relatives about the tragedy that had befallen their loved ones. Michael's parents found it difficult to accept the circumstances that someone in their right mind could wish harm to their children. Nevertheless, they tried to find any positive aspect in the situation, and the fact that their grandchildren had survived could not but rejoice them.
If it hadn't been for Andrew and Naomi, I think it was Smith.
Soon, the tragic news reached the daughter of the 3rd victim, Dan Smith. He was involved in buying precious metals and skillfully adapted to the specifics of his work, easily finding common ground with different people. His business involved handling large sums of cash, sometimes exceeding hundreds of thousands of dollars. This led the police to consider the theory that Dan Smith himself could have been the primary target of the criminal. Tracking the man's movements revealed that before he arrived at the ABC Gold, Games and More pawn shop, he had visited Lawson's jewelry store in Harrodsburg, located 10 miles northeast of Danville. In the jewelry store, investigators found a surveillance camera positioned on the far wall to capture every visitor entering and exiting the store. They hoped that the recording would help them determine if anyone had been following Dan Smith. Smith entered the store at 8:16 in the morning, and there were no other customers in the building at the time. He was carrying the same briefcase that was later found at the ABC Gold, Games and More pawn shop. After greeting the woman behind the counter with a smile, headed to the back of the store. Sometime later, Dan Smith reappeared on the footage, coming out from the back of the store, saying something to an elderly woman who had just entered, and then immediately leaving. It was a typical day in the life of the jewelry store. The external camera recording showed nothing suspicious. The police were left to helplessly monitor the man who had no idea he would soon be at the center of a tragic event. Meanwhile, 9-year-old Andrew Hockensmith was taken to the police station to give his testimony. Andrew described how he had been at the pawn shop with his parents when Dan Smith arrived carrying a bag full of money. While his father and Dan were talking, the stranger entered and immediately demanded the bag. According to the boy, Dan Smith immediately handed over his briefcase, after which the stranger shot him. "My father asked him to stop, but he also shot him with a pistol similar to the one I play with," Andrew said. Meanwhile, the mother instructed Andrew to take Naomi to the back of the store and hide in the closet. Andrew took his little sister and hid. It was then that the criminal aimed the gun at Angie. "I don't know who he is and why he did it, but it seems to me that the reason was money," the 9-year-old boy concluded. He described the stranger as a very tall man with a blonde beard that looked fake, matching the description provided by a witness from Rainbow Cleaners. To follow all possible leads, the police's next step was to thoroughly examine the business run by the Hockensmith family. It turned out that the ABC Gold, Games and More pawn shop had another owner, Steve Devine. While he usually attended Friday deals with Dan Smith, he was absent on the tragic morning of September 20th. This information raised
concerns, making determining his whereabouts a top priority. Steve Devine explained that he had developed an allergy that morning and was forced to cancel all his appointments, a story confirmed by his wife. The alibi and the fact that Steve Devine did not own a silver minivan helped to rule him out as a suspect. He also explained why there were no surveillance cameras in the pawn shop. According to him, the security system had been removed by the previous owner, Kenneth Allen Keith, and the new owners had not yet installed a replacement. 48-year-old Keith, like his deceased friend Michael Hockensmith, was a priest. Pastor Keith sold the pawn shop when he was diagnosed with brain cancer, but he remained the owner of another similar establishment, Gold Rush Buyers, in Pulaski County, neighboring Danville's Boyle County. Michael's family revealed that he prayed for his friend every evening, hoping for his recovery. Their friendship, which began when Michael worked at a youth church camp, had lasted for 15 years. The Hockensmith family always held Pastor Keith in high regard, and for their son Andrew, he was like a beloved uncle. With no significant leads, investigators decided to try their luck in finding possible street surveillance systems near the ABC Gold, Games and More pawn shop. They found a camera on the office building of the real estate office, Danville Rentals. The surveillance footage captured a silver minivan at 8:45 in the morning, but the image was too blurry to identify the license plate or the make of the vehicle. Once again, the police had to rely on the witness's testimony from Rainbow Cleaners, which described the car as an old model with a distinctive square body shape. The car in the video clearly showed a square rear bumper that matched this description. The color, type, and shape of the car all indicated that the police had found the criminal's vehicle. They continued to search for surveillance systems farther and farther from the pawn shop. At 8:17 in the morning, the camera at the local Ephraim McDowell Hospital captured the same vehicle. And finally, investigators were able to determine that it was a silver Dodge minivan. Michael and Angela's family organized a candlelight vigil in their memory. Hundreds of compassionate people attended that evening, demonstrating the depth of love for their lost ones. Similarly, like the Hockensmith family, Dan Smith's close relatives were outraged that the whims of another had led to the loss of their loved one. Despite their grief, they chose not to let anger overshadow their other emotions and joined in the funeral proceedings. Meanwhile, the Danville Police Department appealed to the public for any information about the criminal or his vehicle. Immediately after this, on September 24th, the police received a call from Tracy Harold, a pastor in Warren, Michigan. He claimed to be a friend of Kenneth Keith and mentioned that during their last conversation, they touched on the topic of the murder in Danville, and at that moment, Mr. Keith seemed to change. Pastor Kenneth Allen informed his friend that on that particular day, he was driving to Danville for medicine for his wife. He also expressed a sense of guilt for what happened, as he had given Michael Hockensmith the opportunity to become the owner of his former business. Keith put forward the theory that Dan Smith himself could have been the main target of the attacker. Keith explained that Dan would come to him every Sunday to pawn all his gold, always carrying large sums of cash with him. Keith speculated that someone might have tracked Dan's route and ultimately targeted him, but there was more to the story. As it turned out, the pastor's relationship with the Hockensmith family was not as everyone had believed.
Between you and me, brother, they were crooked people. They went into it with the whole point from day one to take over that business from me.
These words raised suspicions, leading to Pastor Keith being added to the list of suspects. To verify his alibi, investigators decided to review the surveillance footage from the Good Neighbor Pharmacy, where, according to the pastor, he bought medicine for his wife. At 9:24 in the morning, a man entered the pharmacy, indeed Pastor Kenneth Allen Keith, but he looked nothing like the man who had committed the triple attack just minutes earlier. He was not wearing a green jacket or a beard, which were distinctive features of the assailant. However, this did not rule out his involvement in the attack.
There was a 7-minute gap between Andrew Hawkinsmith's call to the police and the pastor's arrival at the pharmacy. The police decided to check if it was possible to travel from the crime scene to the Good Neighbor Pharmacy in such a short time. They found that the trip took about 5 minutes in total, so it was plausible to commit the murders, quickly get into a car, and reach the pharmacy to establish a solid alibi. The key clue was that Pastor Keith had an unregistered 2008 Dodge minivan, which was silver. However, all the evidence found was circumstantial, and it was not enough for an arrest. So, investigators turned to Tracy Harold to participate in a series of fake phone calls aimed at the suspect. Luckily, Tracy agreed. During these calls, Pastor Keith finally revealed his true feelings towards the Hawkinsmith family.
When somebody's being murdered in such a heinous way as what this was, you want to make them, out to be saints. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But between you and me, brother, they were crooked people.
Is that right?
They went into it with the whole point from day one to take over that business from me. I don't mean to speak ill.
No, hey, man.
Facts are facts.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I can't tell nobody none of this because what does it make me look?
Yeah.
It makes me look like a perpetrator thing.
And then, what everyone had been waiting for happened. Keith began discussing details of the case that had not been made public.
I would be able, but I was at the party. I would have him the positive.
Following that, Pastor Kenneth Keith explained that he left Danville and returned to Somerset. He then took his car to the car wash to prepare it for a planned family vacation. At 10:50 in the morning, Keith was seen on camera walking down the hallway to the cashier's counter with a noticeable smile. It seemed clear that he was not involved in the dreadful crime that occurred earlier that morning. The external camera footage covering the parking lot showed Pastor Kenneth leaving the car wash in the same silver Dodge at 11:25, matching all the images previously obtained from various surveillance systems in Danville. At that point, they had enough evidence to arrest the suspect. He was offered a polygraph test to prove or alleviate his involvement in the pawn shop crime, but his response was rather unusual. Keith stated that he would not be able to pass the polygraph successfully because during his military service, he was tasked with eliminating 3 individuals. The investigators obtained a warrant to search Kenneth Allen Keith's pawn shop, where they discovered a fake beard and a significant amount of cash. The police could not find any legitimate explanation for how he acquired most of the money. They also found bundles of bills wrapped in a ribbon with the name of the bank that issued them, revealing Dan Smith as their client. Further investigation revealed that the money found in Keith's pawn shop had recently been withdrawn from the account of a dead broker. Additionally, several .22 caliber casings were found in Keith's pawn shop. According to ballistics analysis, they were fired from the same weapon used to shoot the parents of young Andrew and Naomi. Based on all the evidence found, Kenneth Allen Keith was charged with 3 counts of deliberate homicide and first-degree robbery. It turned out that Pastor Keith believed that Michael Hawkinsmith and Steve Devine had conspired to get rid of him from the business. Knowing that Dan Smith carried large sums of money, Keith decided to exact his revenge on the day of their planned meeting at the pawn shop. Keith aimed to mislead law enforcement into thinking the crime was motivated by robbery. In reality, Michael Hawkinsmith and his partner Steve Devine had no involvement in the imagined conspiracy against Keith. During the investigation, no evidence of discreditable activities by Michael Hawkinsmith and Steve Devine was found. On September 20th, the criminal arrived in Danville in his silver Dodge Caravan. He circled the pawn shop for a while until he noticed Dan Smith's car parked nearby. The first victim was the broker himself, followed by Michael and then Angela Hawkinsmith. The pastor then took all the cash from Dan Smith's case and calmly left the crime scene, stopping at the Good Neighbor Pharmacy to be captured on its surveillance cameras and secure an alibi. His decision to go to the car wash was another attempt to remove traces and destroy any evidence that might have been left on his vehicle. In 2017, just before the trial, Kenneth Allen Keith pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Before the trial, investigators obtained medical documents from the Veterans Hospital and discovered that the pastor had never had a brain tumor. How could someone who seemed so spiritually inclined commit such a heinous crime? Furthermore, how was he going to live with the knowledge of what he had done?